up, everybody? Happy Wednesday.
Perfect timing over here.
Happy Wednesday. Happy New Comic Book Day. It's time for Comics and Coffee. I have a special guest today. Mr. Cameron Rice is joining us.
Yeah, I'm right in the middle of reading the new Kieran Gillen.
And it's really good.
It's really, really good. Kieran
weird.
Gillen, I was going to start off by going I didn't read it because I usually like reading Gillen's non-Marvel, DC, non-super in trade form because they can get kind of heady and deep very quick.
Yeah.
But so far, I'm halfway through this right now. This is great.
Oh, it's really good.
Really great, really easy read.
It's really fun. It's it has a lot to say about what's going on in the world right now politically in a really interesting way. So it is time for Comics and Coffee. Adam is on a little bit of a vacation. Never mind. I was just trying to remind you that we're on boom mics now instead of headsets. So, so
we hear people making drinks. It is a warm California day.
It is.
It's a nice little warm day. But yeah, so it's New Comic Day. Adam is on vacation. Adam usually covers the DC stuff. But I'll say, actually, there was a lot of stuff. I mostly read and trade nowadays, except for XMen, which we will be getting into.
Oh, we will be talking
for
about
sure. But there is some DC stuff I did pick up. But there's a lot of other things that came out today. I was like, part 13, part 12. And I was like, well, I don't got time to read 12 of these at the moment.
But you do.
Well, I did.
I'll make Adam do it. You got to do it too.
Well, I did read all of Silver Surfer Black. There was a lot of Marvel stuff I did read. But the one thing, Batman Universe, which we will get into, the Bendis Batman book, which is, real good.
Apparently, Armut says on the Twitch chat side of things that Once and Future sold out 3 times before its release.
Really?
That's impressive.
Yeah, it's really. Who's the artist on this? Because it is damn good.
It's Dan Mora, Power Rangers.
Killing it.
Dan Mora over at Boom Studios.
Yep. Real good.
Yeah.
I love the detail and all this because it's very simple, but it's very detailed. But yeah, this is great. So, I guess everyone knows what you've been reading the last couple weeks. Have they been watching?
If you've been watching, I've been reading a ton of the indie books, a lot of Marvel. Adam is usually here to cover our DC books, but Adam's on vacation in San Diego right now, so you're going to get less DC coverage this week. Outside of the one Batman book.
Yeah.
I grabbed a couple just in case somebody wanted to read them, but, we've been really diving into X-Men.
Yes.
Really diving into X-Men. The fact that Hickman's putting out a weekly X-Men book right now means every week we get to update you. Every week we get to have a long discussion about it. So Adam and I have been saving those discussions for the end of the show. Because it will probably take 30 minutes.
Yes.
Of just going through the whole book, talking about it. So make sure you read it now. Pick up your book.
Yeah, Power of X Part 2, but it's really Part 4 of this whole thing that Hickman's been doing. But yeah, Power of X 2 of 6. So go pick that up because we will be diving into that one.
Deep dive.
For sure. But guess maybe stay on the Marvel train for a little bit. Punisher Kill Crew.
Oh, we'll get into it.
So tell me what we're
I'll tell you about the
doing.
format because I didn't tell you shit before you came on the show.
I'm jumping in. I'm in the deep end, baby.
We really just shoot the shit for a little while
Right.
because we got 2 hours to fill.
Very true.
It's a 2-hour-long show, which for the people who might try to listen to this as a podcast or try to watch it, I don't think we release this as a podcast because we show so many visuals. But if you're watching it on YouTube later, apologies.
Yeah.
It's 2 hours because we have time to fill in our live schedule. That's why you're getting a 2-hour video. Not because we wanted to do a 2-hour comic book show, but because that's how much time we have to fill.
But I can talk about comics for 2 hours.
So
easy.
that's why we have a little bit of just shooting the shit for the first 30 to 45 minutes. Then we will literally go through and we will just go down the list and look at every single book that we picked up this week. And we will just go through it. And then at the end, we'll talk about X-Men. But we usually have 1 or 2 topics we talk about at the head. And one of the things I wanted to talk about, and I kind of gave you a little bit of a primer on it, was Dan Slott tweeted out this week that the only part about Avengers Endgame that he didn't like was when Spidey initiated his kill mode.
Right.
And then he went on to say that if that's the only thing he didn't like in that
in a
entire
3-hour-plus
movie, that's a pretty good thing. But he described that he didn't think it was something that Spidey never kills.
Yeah.
And that was his whole thing. And I think he had a little bit more to say about it. While you talk about it, I'll pull up his I'll pull up exactly what he said.
So I was not aware of this tweet until you told me about it. I didn't know if there was like a thread or that was just the tweet.
I'll pull it up.
Because sometimes there's a lot of great comic writers out there who have like a thread about their theories. I've done that occasionally about some characters. But I won't deny, when I saw the movie the first time and that scene came up, I did feel a little bit of like a, kind of a thing. A moment of like, oh no.
Okay.
I didn't dislike it. It's not a moment. There are moments in superhero movies where I'll walk out and go, that's bullshit. That's not the character. I don't buy that, blah, blah, blah. I didn't feel that. But there was a little moment of like, oh, okay, kind of a thing. But it is interesting because I do feel that way in the...
So we're just gonna...
Yeah, this is it.
We'll pull this up full screen and we'll all look at it together. Okay. So, confession. There was one moment I did not like in all of Avengers Endgame. This. Peter Parker shouldn't kill. Even when it comes to Thanos' evil army of alien space hounds. But not liking one moment out of 3 hours and 2 minutes ain't that bad. I know this is crazy caveat to add to any post. I know it's basic common sense, but the above tweet is my personal opinion on the matter.
You probably got death tweets and was called a cuck or something.
You didn't like it, dude! I didn't like one moment. You didn't fucking like it, dude!
Yeah.
And it's a personal opinion about a fictional character.
So that was posted, the first one was 3:35 p.m. When was this posted?
It doesn't say the exact, because he added it. It's okay if your opinion on this is different. It's all good. Now, he had other things he said. So if we go back to his... okay, this is where it's an old guy using Twitter and he didn't add it to the thread. I think it's easier to accept heroic characters killing their enemies in movie land. Die Hard, Lethal Weapon, Star Wars, Lord of the Rings. But when you start dealing with characters like Peter Parker, SpiderMan, that's a different metric for me. Your mileage may vary. There are moments in the comics where Spider-Man's written as he is about to kill someone, like he's been taken right up to that edge, but something always brings him back to his core ethics, or the writer fudges things for him. I've been guilty of that. So, thoughts? Should we talk about this? Are you?
So it's I am kind of one of those like Batman shouldn't kill people.
Okay.
Even when people like will then send me tweets of like the comics from the 30s where he shoots Dracula in his coffin. Which is one of my favorite panels ever, which is Batman fights a vampire and just like... I'm like, they didn't know. They were making it up as they went along. But I am one of those people where I'm like, I kind of don't want Batman to kill. But I'm okay with, in Batman Begins, where he goes, I don't have to save you. Like, I was okay with that.
Okay.
With Spider-Man, I feel similarly. Like the Hulk kills and breaks somebody, Captain America killing somebody, Iron Man killing somebody. For some reason, I'm okay with that.
It's so funny because I think some people imagine Captain America doesn't kill, and it's like, yo, that motherfucker was a
World War
soldier.
II. He killed a lot of people.
He was a soldier.
And I think a lot of it can kind of depend on the origin, like what made them want to be what they were. Whereas like, with Iron Man, it's like, I was kidnapped, this, that, and the other, blah, blah, blah. So he doesn't really have like that, like, I did this because someone close to me died. And I think that's the thing about like with the characters where it's like someone close to me has died. That's where I can feel a little bit like, well, then I think you're so moral that you're like breaking your body every day and doing these things. You would then not put someone else. And that's where it's like what Slot said, kind of like those moments where he's so mad at Osborn and he's on the brink of killing him and like the mask is off. He's like, Peter. But he's never done it. He's never pulled the trigger on Osborn. The difference is with the movie, again, I could feel like a little bit like, but I'm not like, what the fuck about it the way I was with like the most recent Batman stuff. I think because even though like this movieverse has never really established an Uncle Ben fully. It's always been kind of like, well, you know what May's been through. And that's kind of, and that was actually sort of some of the issues I had a little bit with Homecoming, was there was sort of this broadly vaguey, well, we all know what happened with Spider-Man, so we don't have to talk about it. Well, because they've never really talked about it.
And we don't get Gwen dying either. We don't really know where his morals stand.
There's not really a I never kill in this Spider-Man. So for me, there was a little bit of like, where I was like, ooh, but I'm also kind of like, you know what? Yeah. And also considering the things were at stake, and also the fact that he himself was like dead for 5 years, I'm kind of like, oh, okay. You know what I mean? Like, I was willing to go with it more, but I get where Dan Slott's coming from.
I do too. I was gonna pull up the scene for us to watch and make our own judgments, but these are all screeners from other countries.
From China?
Yeah. It's like, I know we got the Blu-ray back there, but I was just watching it though. Okay,
Well, they also did the thing of having him kill what seemingly were these like mindless creatures.
There's that.
Like none of the Black Order. Like
no,
Corvus Glaive is not getting stabbed by Spider-Man.
No. Here's my thoughts on it, and I'm just gonna. I'm gonna go out and say, would Tony Stark add to this suit a kill mode? Yeah, we can
Tony
believe
Stark,
that.
yes.
It's Tony Stark's suit that he built for Peter.
Yes.
So I don't think Peter would build that into his suit. But the other thing I can take from this is, if you're in a heightened situation and you're this kid, and you're a kid in a modern age who plays video games,
right?
Saying something like initiate kill mode doesn't to me immediately mean shoot people in the head.
Right. It's
more like an activation to your most dangerous mode, because if you watch the clip, he doesn't kill these things. He's just, his arms just come out and they're all being pushed away. Like, they're not being like murdered.
Stabbed.
Yeah, they're not even, they don't even show him actually murdering these things.
Right.
It's just more like an aggressive mode that's being enabled, that's protecting him. I don't like to go as far as say that he is now like Peter Parker's murdering people. Like, I don't even feel like that came across in the scene. It
no, it did not. It did not.
He was trying to save himself and protect himself, and it wasn't like ripping the heads off things and pulling out their spine.
He wasn't breaking necks all of a sudden.
Yeah.
No, I agree. It's one of those hard things. It was like Spider-Man and Batman are the two characters where so often the storylines that a lot of writers will do is the storyline of, will they go that far? Like, that's the whole thing about the Venom suit, is that symbiote suit was like pushing him to become like darker and evil, but none of that has happened with this Peter Parker, so that's why it's a little bit of a degree of being able to go like, oh, okay, you know. And like you said, he's pushing things away. Now, if like Peter Parker, if we had like a super established Uncle Ben death, a super established Gwen death, and he was Venom and all these other things, and it's like Peter Parker doesn't go that far, and then this happened in the moment in the movie, I think that's where I would have gone like,
this is a weird thing.
No.
Yeah. This is a weird thing to talk about, because I have my thoughts on Peter Parker and what I think Peter Parker should be allowed to do and allowed not to do. But we have to keep in mind the movies have their own internal logic. If we're following the movie's internal logic, what does this world's Peter Parker stand for?
Right.
Do we know exactly yet? Have we gotten a really good look into exactly what this Peter Parker says? This is where I draw the fucking line.
Yeah.
This is what is okay and what is not okay. I don't think we've got that from him yet. I think we're still seeing him as a kid who is looking up to his idols, and he hasn't got to the point where he says, this is who I am, and this is what I feel. And I feel like Far From Home was setting that up, like Peter becoming his own man and creating his own legacy outside of Tony Stark.
Yes.
So I'd love for that to eventually be.
That's the thing is like I loved Far From Home, but my it's not even a criticism. It's not a criticism at all. It's just more like, oh, don't do this a third time now.
Yeah, please.
I don't want
Peter to be Peter.
Yeah, I don't want the third villain to be Tony Stark had wronged me. And we've had that twice now, both with Vulture and Mysterio. It was like Tony Stark had wronged me, and I'm going to take it out on you, or you're in my way of getting back at Tony Stark. And so my hope, and then Tony Stark obviously looms large over the whole MCU, but I am hoping whatever Spider-Man 3 ends up being, and I think with what they did in the post-credit scenes, I don't know if you could do, here comes the chameleon, and by the way, Tony Stark wronged me.
Right.
Like that's, and again, it's not a criticism of Far From Home, but that's just my only thing about like, ooh, don't do that a third time. Let the Spider-Man villain be motivated by Spider-Man, you know.
As far as Spider-Man killing in the comics, I can only think of a couple times, and I pulled something up because I'm like, I can only think of a couple. I can think of Moreland in Straczynski's run, the Other.
Yes.
His whole purpose of coming out of that shell and having the claws, like he's the Other, he's the only one that can kill. Again, killing a vampire.
I forgot about the Other.
It's a vampire.
Killing a
It's okay if
monster.
it's a vampire. It's okay. There was another one, I feel like it was in Straczynski's run even, that was like kind of a zombie guy. And he justified it by saying he was already dead. And then for the graphic I used for YouTube, that's actually from Dan Slott's run. But it is when Doc Ock was in Spider-Man's body.
Yes, and Doc Ock had no issues.
Right.
Taking
Which
out people.
is really funny to hear Dan Slott say, like, this is where he draws the line. This is where Peter Parker doesn't do this or Peter Parker does that. Part of my biggest issue with Doc Ock and Spider-Man's body was having to see Peter Parker do all these things for so long. It went on for so long.
It was 24 issues?
It was like over a year.
Yeah, it was over a year. I know that.
And I was just like, I want Peter back. I got over it really quickly. I was like, I'm not... I was like a bit for me that I was like, okay, we did it. Can we please move on? And to me, it's the same reason he illustrates in his tweet thread there of like, I'm tired of seeing Spider-Man do all this stuff. That's not Spider-Man to me. You're giving me something else that I didn't really want.
Someone in the chat asked about Superman. I am of the firm belief Superman should always looks for another way. He always believes there's another way. Because he's not a soldier. There's none of that stuff that there's a lot with the other heroes. I am of the firm belief that like Superman, at the end of the day, has those old school 30s Christian Kansas values written by two Jewish men about there's always another way. And that's always my thing with Superman. Superman will always try and save everybody, even the villains, even Luthor, no matter how many times Luthor's done terrible shit. So that's my belief on Superman, but that's not every hero. Clearly, as I love Wolverine.
Yeah.
Wolverine has no problem snicking people left and right.
Oh man, going through this article of times Spider-Man is killed.
Yeah, how many of these are alternate or
alternate universe?
Elseworldy?
Almost always, but this one, of course, is from Spider-Man Reign when he killed Venom in the Sinister Six.
Yep.
I don't know if we can use Spider-Man Reign as an example when Mary Jane had already died from radioactive poisoning from sleeping with Spider-Man for so many years.
Poison sperm.
Poison sperm killed Mary Jane. So already you're starting that book with me being like, I don't know if this counts.
Well, it's also, that wasn't even the start of the book. The whole mystery was like, how did Mary Jane die? Because there's
Yeah.
all this guilt, and I think it's in the middle of the third issue. That's a crazy book. I don't hate that book. That's a book that a lot of people hate.
I don't hate it, but it's definitely one of those where I'm like, I don't know if you could call that Spider-Man.
Yeah.
You know?
So that's alternate.
Okay, here's one I didn't know about. It's someone called The Finisher.
Kill like is notable known as the Finisher.
See,
he was a hitman hired by the Red Skull.
An expendable villain known as The Finisher.
I wish they put which numbered comic this was.
Right, that really bothers me. Its attempt was to launch missiles at Spider-Man and hope for the best, but Spider-Man's strongest traits is his agility. He dodges the missile and sends him back at the Finisher for an explosive demise. What do you think about in the Peter Parker that we got in Sam Raimi's films, who dodges the Goblin Glider, causing it to hit him and kill him, to kill Norman Osborn?
Yeah, I guess that's a thing of like, from like, again, that sort of falls into the same with Batman Begins, the like, I won't kill you, but I don't have to save you. But it is that kind of interesting, but also, man, that Goblin Glider was moving so quick. Peter barely made it. I don't know if he would have had time to web him out of the way.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the one thing
Charlie.
the one thing I'm cool with in the Sam Raimi movies is it did feel like it defined his character for the next two movies.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Like him letting Norman Osborn die affected who he was, affected his relationship with his best friend, with Harry.
Well, that was
I feel like when you make it count and you make it matter, and there's a moral conundrum on his head.
Well, that's part of the reason why I loved Far From Home quite a bit more than Homecoming. Is I liked a lot of Homecoming, but Homecoming, on top of the fact that I feel like there was a couple things not established, but there was also a degree of like, what I love about Spider-Man comics and the Raimi films is that you care about those other characters. Like the twists with the Vulture, or that the reveal of the Vulture even, is like a great reveal. That it's like, oh my God, it's her father.
Yeah.
And I feel like in the comics and in the Raimi films, we would have seen like, how does that affect that character, not just Peter? And I feel like Homecoming had a lot of like, here are things that are affecting Peter, and I never really felt like I liked the cast; they were all very likable, the other kids, but I never felt like I got to know those other kids to understand outside of the realm of it totally sucks to have your date leave you at a dance. I feel like the Raimi films did a really good job of like, here's how Harry's affected, here's how MJ's affected, here's how Aunt May's affected. And I feel like Homecoming was really like, here's how Peter's affected by what Tony Stark is doing, and the other kids and castmates didn't get much to do for me to care about what's happening to them. Whereas I feel like Far From Home really nailed.
Oh, the high
here's
school.
the other kids. Here's the other stuff.
I mean, can you believe I've only seen it once, which blows my mind in and of itself. I've been so busy. But I really love the relationships in Far From Home. I think to me that's what made Far From Home was all the relationships of the characters.
Because that's for me what I love about Spider-Man is that I love that so many Spider-Man comics can be Harry and Felicia having a conversation for pages, and you're just as invested as you are if Peter's on the page. And I feel like, because I'll always think about that Spider-Man 2, the marketing for Spider-Man 2, the last shot of that big trailer was Harry Osborn taking the mask off.
Yep.
And I'm like, because you cared about Harry.
Yeah.
They made you care about Harry.
You were wondering, how does he feel about his father's death?
Yes.
That's just, I will admit to you, as much as I do think Far From Home and Homecoming are my favorite Spider-Man movies because I feel like they capture Spider-Man better, I won't argue that I think Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 1 and 2 are better written.
Yeah.
Like, they're better screenplays. There's better drama within it. Whereas I feel like when Spider-Man, Far From Home, and Homecoming are great movies and great depictions of Spider-Man, when you take out the Marvel Cinematic Universe, they're kind of scripts that are like, you know.
Well, that's why I'm very curious when the day eventually comes how they are going to, and I think we'll talk about this when we talk about the X-Men too, is that when they bring the X-Men in. Because the Fantastic Four is really good about being able to kind of be a part of the universe, and hey, Peter's hanging out with Johnny and all this kind of stuff that I think is going to be great. So much of the X-Men, and so many of the great X-Men runs kind of ignore that they're part of the Marvel Universe.
Oh, yes.
There might be a panel that's like, here's Thor and so-and-so.
Look at what we're doing with Hickman right now.
There's literally one panel that shows other Marvel characters.
Yeah.
In 4 issues. And I think
it's the Fantastic Four. And that matters because Richard's son, Franklin Richards is a mutant.
I'm talking about one of the alternate Moira timelines with Magneto.
Right.
You see the Avengers.
Yeah. But as far as interacting, we see
yes.
Fantastic Four, but I feel like that still matters to the story because of who Franklin is.
Yes. And so I'm very interested to see when they bring the X-Men into the MCU, by how much those movies are interconnected with all the other characters. How are you going to do the X-Men in that universe where it's like, oh, we're ostracized weirdos after you have already had like 10 years and Thanos and all this other stuff? Is the public going to really give a shit that there's mutants? And I think like that's going to be the biggest hurdle the MCU X-Men movies have.
And I really wonder if they're going to let the interpersonal drama happen. To me, the X-Men...
the X-Men's a soap opera. That's what made the X-Men so... But it's going to be that interesting degree of like, how much do you bring in the MCU? Like, is it just going to be like, oh, here's S.H.I.E.L.D. on TV and Spider-Man swings by, but otherwise the X-Men are in their own corner like they are in the comics.
Yeah. It's a tough one. I feel like they have a huge, hard job ahead of them to make the X-Men work in the MCU.
Oh, yeah.
It's so different from the Avengers. It has so many other implications. Rise Parton in the YouTube chat says, I feel like this is being overthought. 1, Peter is being crushed by crazy-eyed space dogs. And 2, he was trying to keep the Infinity Gauntlet out of their hands, thus protecting everyone. I agree that, in general, it might be being overthought. In our instance, if you're paying attention to the conversation, we stopped talking about that a long time ago. I don't think we care too much about the movie scene. I think it just opens up to a broader conversation about, should Peter Parker be allowed to kill? Should Spider-Man be allowed to kill? And when is it okay?
Yes.
And when is it not okay?
Yeah.
And I think somebody said, Megalo Blazemon said on the YouTube side, this was Quiasa, said that I think it's different. I think the glider impale was a situation where it's literally save myself or die. And Batman Begins was different because that was a conscious choice to let someone die.
It's true.
But I don't think Batman and Spider-Man should ever be considered the same character by any means.
The only reason I bring them up in the same is like very often a lot of the writers, every 10 years there'll be the story where it's like, how far will they go? And like that's usually when you introduce a new Robin, and that's usually when Spider-Man gets a new suit. Is the how dark will they go storyline. And because both their origins are about like, I became this because someone close to me died. And like there's jokes about like how many superheroes have like dead parents and dead this and dead that. But as far as like, that's why I became the thing, it really is like Spider-Man and Batman.
Right. And I do feel in my head, I put Peter Parker in a different place than Bruce Wayne. I feel like Bruce Wayne is far more likely to go to lengths that Peter Parker wouldn't.
Right.
And he's done it many times. And I think part of what defines Peter Parker is... And honestly, okay, have you been reading Zdarsky's new Daredevil run?
I picked up the trade. I have not started
Holy
yet, but I picked
fuck.
up the trade.
It is amazing.
Yeah,
and
that's what I keep hearing.
It might be my favorite Daredevil run, especially since Mark Waid, and it's to the point where I might even like it more than Mark Waid's run, which I never thought I would say, because
that's a great run.
There's moments in it that are just so good, but there is a great moment with Daredevil and Peter in there where Peter's just in his apartment as Spider-Man, and Daredevil's talking about how he can hear his heartbeat and like how he can hear every fiber of his muscles tensing, so much power that he's never used, but also like he's the best of us and he doesn't even know it. And that's like, to me, what defines Peter is I feel like Batman knows he's the best of them.
Oh, 100%. Oh yeah,
Batman
that's the main
knows
difference.
he is.
Oh yeah.
Peter doesn't. And that's part of the difference in those characters. Peter is kind of ignorant to his own place in the Marvel Universe, and that when he freaks out and geeks out about Captain America, not realizing he is just as influential and just as much a beacon as Captain America is to so many people.
Now, some of my favorite renditions of Batman are when he's part of the JLA, and they always kind of make him look like a jerk.
Yeah.
Where like other members of the JLA, except for Superman, are like, I hate this guy. He's such an ass, and nobody feels that way about Spider-Man. I mean, people get annoyed by Spider-Man.
Anytime that Batman's had to already have all the plans to take down every Justice League member, you know what I mean? You're like, which happens a lot in the Justice League comics. Oh yeah, it's pretty much this whole like, he's pure power and doesn't even know it. The best of us.
And he's here in my home. That's great.
Oh, this run is just, and it's basically Peter Parker showing up to tell Daredevil, you're done. Take off the suit. You're done, and I hope somebody would do this for me if the time came. Talk about heroes killing someone. This whole run is about Daredevil accidentally killing someone. Because he gets in a car accident in the last volume, and he's rusty, and he pulls a punch just the wrong way. And the first half of that volume is like him coming to terms with thinking he's being set up. And then he eventually has to realize, no, he made a mistake, and he killed somebody. And now he has to live with it. And it's crazy. Some of the most awesome moments in this book are when he confronts other heroes. And I think right before that run-in with Spider-Man, he runs into Iron Fist, Jessica Jones, and Luke Cage. He thinks they're going to take him in, and they're like, "Nah, man, it happens." And he's mad at them for not taking him in, and he's mad at them for like, "You were supposed to be here to stop me." And that's what makes that next moment with Peter Parker so great, because he can't even count on his own friends to hold him accountable. And then Spider-Man shows up and is like, "You're fucking done, dude. Hang up the suit." And it's like, yes.
I love that. Also, Marco Cicchetto is one of my favorite artists that I feel like not enough people talk about. He does great work. He just did Old Man Hawkeye this is something I do want to talk about. He did Old Man Hawkeye for 10 of 12 issues, which I'm just like, and I'm sure that's not him, but man, me and Hector were talking about this last week about how I kind of wish, and Marvel's more guilty of it than DC lately, let an artist at least finish a run, because now there's this 12-issue Hawkeye arc where Marco Cicchetto does 10 of the 12 issues, and I'm just like, just let him finish it. Let him do the last two. But Marco Cicchetto, I loved Rucka's Punisher run from like maybe almost 10 years ago now. But if y'all never read Rucka's Punisher run that Cicchetto did the art for, that is so good. It's so good.
I saw somebody in the Facebook side of things saying comic sales are at an all-time low. What will people in the industry do to keep comic books relevant? I have some issues with this statement. That sounds like a statement thrown around from like men's rights activist groups and stuff like that, from Comicsgate, who have their own like...
Yeah, comics are selling low because we're putting black people in now.
Right.
Yeah.
That sounds like something like that. I will say they're about 1% lower this year than they were last year if you're Marvel or DC. Like, superhero comics might be selling lower, but more indie comics are on the stands and getting in front of people than ever before in the history of comic books.
Right.
We're in a unique time right now where anyone can put out a book and put it in front of you. And if you're only tracking the sales of Marvel and DC, yes, they are down, but 1%. Like, you know what I mean? Like 1% from last year. And the drop last year wasn't even as big as the drop from 2017 to 2018. So I feel like... And you also have to keep in mind, digital is becoming really big. So a lot of comic book stores will tell you their sales are down, but that's partly because sales are up on things like Comixology, on Marvel Unlimited. And that's the future, and that's just the way.
Well, and it's
things
also
are.
now, it's the part of being, for both of DC and Marvel more than anything else, being part of these major conglomerates is that, for lack of a better way of putting it, these are drops in the bucket.
Yeah.
Considering like how much even the cheapest superhero movie costs to make, this is paper.
Yeah,
and
I don't.
pencil and an artist,
I feel like for Marvel, it's kind of like the comics now are like, okay, it's not even. It's less than the entire Marvel comics industry is less than Disney's marketing budget for like one movie.
and not even a big movie.
Okay.
Yeah. The research and development they're doing for Disney Plus is not even going to cover Marvel for 1 year. So I think
Yeah.
it's one of those things. But no, so what is the second topic on top of Spider-Man's?
Outside of Spooderman's, since we've talked a little bit about like,
And someone asked about the most recent run that's going on with Nick Spencer. It's fantastic. If you aren't reading,
I'm
it.
mixed.
Really?
I'm liking it the most now that he's brought in the superior foes of Spider-Man. Because I feel like his wheelhouse is writing villains of Spider-Man.
I would agree.
I feel like he writes villains better than he writes Peter.
Interesting.
So I'm a little mixed on it.
But Friendly Neighborhood by Tom Taylor is also fantastic. And not enough people are talking about that one. That's real good.
But we didn't really come to a conclusion on there. Do you think Peter Parker should ever kill?
No.
I'm going to say no as well. I'm going to say no matter what. Peter would sacrifice himself before the life of someone else.
Yeah.
Unless you're a vampire.
Yeah. I mean, to me, like that's one of my favorite moments from Homecoming, is where he webs the Vulture and tries to pull him back, and he goes, "I'm trying to save you." I'm like, that's Peter Parker.
Yep.
That's him. That's perfectly him.
Pretty much. Okay. So next topic I would say we go right into is, a lot of people probably don't know this, Cameron, but I know this about you. You are a huge X-Men fan.
Yes, X-Men and Batman. Since I've been reading when I was a little kid, I've never, until recently, so we'll get into that a little bit, I've always read an X-Men book. Even if it's not the main one, there will be a monthly X-Men book that I'm picking up. And that recently stopped happening when Marvel was really pushing the Inhumans.
Right.
And Wolverine was dead. Because usually if I'm not reading the main X-Men, I might pick up a Wolverine.
Yeah.
I might pick up that. Marvel was pushing the Inhumans real hard because they didn't at the time have the film rights to the X-Men. So they were really shutting the X-Men
They'll tell you
aside.
that wasn't why.
That was
but,
why.
Oh my God, anyone could see what was happening. Literally anybody with a brain could see. And especially now that...
Well, the fact that there was no Fantastic Four book being published at the exact same time, too.
It's like, get the fuck out of here.
Yeah.
They were basically saying, like, we're going to hold these characters hostage and give you no free marketing for the rights you hold. But at the same time, you can also see, as movies have started coming out, Marvel puts a lot of ideas for upcoming films in the comics.
Yes.
Like, you can kind of see it's like a market test for whether or not the movie should go in a certain direction, or they'll introduce certain characters or ideas to the comics, and then 3 years later it shows up in a movie.
Yeah.
Why are these movies using plot lines from the last 2 or 3 years unless there's some synergy in what's going on?
Yeah, so the only time I was not reading the X-Men ever in all my years of reading comics was that era. And it sucks because two great writers, Charles Soule and Jeff Lemire, are fantastic writers.
Both amazing.
And they were just saddled with, you need to make the Inhumans look cool in the X-Men books. And they had some ideas, but like I just couldn't do it. And there was no Wolverine, because Wolverine was dead at that time. So there was no X-Men book I was picking up at that time. It was
there was like Brian Wood's run on Ultimate X-Men was great. And
Yes.
Kitty Pryde and the X, like all that stuff was really good. I like Brian Wood. But again, all these books that were coming out that were X-Men related, I was telling you, I'd pick up 1 or 2 issues, and then I was like, I'm not hooked.
Yeah.
I'm not in it.
Yeah.
These aren't the X-Men. I love X-Men books. When I was growing up, I read more X-Men than anything else.
Yeah.
But I feel so detached from the last 10 years of X-Men. Even Bendis' all-new X-Men run, I was super into it the first couple issues, and then I got burned out.
Well, that ran into, I love that run, both Uncanny and All New. The major thing with that, and it happens to a lot of books, way more at Marvel than DC, is like you'll be 4 issues into something and then suddenly it's part of a crossover. And so the next 3 issues are part of a massive crossover where you got to pick up other books. And for me, nothing makes me go like, "Ah, fuck this."
Yeah.
Harder than, oh, this is part 1. To read part 2, you got to go read this and then read a one-off special that's over here. And I'm just like, come on, man, like don't do that. Just simplify. But yeah, X-Men's always been my jam. X-Men's. I mean, and that's mostly due to X-Men the Animated Series.
Really?
X-Men the Animated
Did
Series.
you hear about the new HeroClix set that just is dropping?
Yeah.
Porter was over here over the weekend shooting videos for WizKids.
Oh no.
And he was like a little kid because he loves the X-Men. Scott Porter's favorite thing in the world is the X-Men.
Apparently Porter had no idea. Me and Hector both have this book about the making of the X-Men the Animated Series. Porter had no idea about it. Like 2 days ago on Twitter, Hector put out a photo, and Porter was like, "How come I didn't know about this book?"
That new HeroClix set though has some awesome figures in it.
Oh,
it's really fun.
But yeah, I think it was X-Men the Animated Series was like the big thing for me, like because that was at the time when it's like Batman Animated Series, Spider-Man, and X-Men. That was the first time I started then going into comic stores. So I'm like 6, and so it's like, and that's when I first started going into comic stores and picking up. And most of the books I picked up at that point was like X-Men Adventures, where it's like clearly like the show as a comic. It wasn't like the main thing.
Do you remember how when Jim Lee's X-Men #1 came out, it was everywhere?
Oh yeah.
Talk about a cultural phenomenon out of
That
nowhere.
and McFarlane's Spider-Man 1.
Yeah.
Those were the two I remember. Those are like burned into my brain.
I have Pizza Hut copies of that X-Men #1.
Oh yeah.
I think we even still have the plastic cups from Pizza Hut with the wraparound of the wraparound image of X-Men.
Well, I think what it is, and so talking a little bit, briefly kind of going through the Hickman stuff, I think the reason, I was reading the very first issue of the Hickman stuff right now, that made me go, I think this is why I like the X-Men overall, is that like, it's the one series within the series that is a consistent what if. Every other, and I think part of that might be because like, you can say the X-Men, and that doesn't necessarily define who the main people in the book are.
No.
It could be anybody. Like right now, I'll say this, 4 issues into the Hickman run, Wolverine and Cyclops are kind of there. They're in a panel or two.
Yeah.
But they're not really
We don't even know if that
present.
Cyclops is a clone of Cyclops. Or
We don't
the
know if
actual
that's
Cyclops.
really Wolverine or another amalgamation
Who
thing.
the fuck knows?
We don't know yet. But I was talking with Hector about this, as I said, every other book, you look at Dan Slott's run on Spider-Man as long as it was, every time I think like a writer kind of tries to do something crazy or radical, especially with like Captain America in the last couple of years or anything like that, people will immediately go, I don't like that, I don't want that. That's not my Spider-Man, that's not my Captain America, that's not this, that's not that. X-Men seems to be the one book, because there's not a defined team. Unlike Fantastic Four, you always have to have those 4.
Yeah.
She-Hulk might come in for a little bit, but generally the book is always going to be about Ben Grimm feels this way, Sue Storm feels ignored, Reed's head is in the clouds, Johnny's being wild. And it's usually every writer's different version of that, maybe when someone leaves the team, they come back to the team. You always kind of have to cover those 4 characters. X-Men, because you can change up that team, Kitty's running it now, Colossus isn't there, this and this and this. I feel like writers have more freedom to come in and do like giant what-if ideas, but rather than put it in a what-if, it's in the main book. What if the X-Men had their own calling? What if someone found a cure?
Yeah.
What if Cerebro became sentient? What if this happened? What if that
What if the
happened?
Danger Room became sentient?
And I never hear really people saying, that's not X-Men. Don't do that. Whereas like Spider-Man, it was like, Dan Slott tried a lot of things, whether you liked it or not. Spider-Man shouldn't be running a business. He needs to be broke. Spider-Man shouldn't be doing this. He needs to be this. This needs to happen. That needs to happen. X-Men seems to be the one mainstream book where people can go,
Okay.
all right.
Okay.
And let writers kind of explore ideas, because you always know the next writer's going to come in and go, we're back to the classic costumes, 5 characters. But the 5 characters might not be the same.
No.
But that's usually what ends up happening.
That's what I was talking to Porter about over the weekend. You know, his favorite X-Man is Iceman. And he's like, yeah, I just never could get into the X-Men animated series as much as everyone else because Iceman wasn't really a big part of it. And I was like, yeah, he was. And he's like, no, he wasn't a part of the main cast.
No, he wasn't.
He's like, that whole series was about couples. It was about Wolverine and Jubilee, Jean and Scott, Rogue and Gambit, and then you've got your outliers of Storm and Beast. And I was like, holy shit. I'm a huge fan of Iceman, and I didn't even recognize that he wasn't a huge part of the animated show.
A lot of people were not super into the animated show that I know because Nightcrawler was only in an episode or 2. He's not in the main.
And it's so funny that
spirit of
the
the
X-Men
show.
is such a wide berth of characters that you love and have all these memories of.
Yeah.
That a character as big as Iceman could be missing, and I didn't even fucking remember it because I've had so many other stories of Iceman and so many other experiences with Iceman over the years. It's nuts.
Yeah, my favorite, someone asked in the chat, my favorite X. I think my favorite character It's Wolverine, but I think my favorite, like when they show up, it's always kind of like, oh, is Magneto. Because there's something about that character where he always brings pathos with him.
Yeah.
Because many writers have some takes on Wolverine where he's just a feral creature and he's mad and this, that, and the other. And some people will do the Samurai Ronin thing, which is more my favorite take. But Magneto shows up in a book and there always feels like there's just immediate pathos right on the page. And I don't know if it's that classic Kirby design of the helmet and the cape, and it feels very royal in a way.
Well, it's also like
and
the
then,
vindication.
Yes.
You know, like, talk about creating one of the most... You have an entire book that's about civil rights and segregation and all these things, and you have your main villain is a person who is directly affected by the Holocaust.
Well, and he's also... The fact is, like, most of the other major villains of other superheroes, Doom is a psycho egomaniac. Norman Osborn's a psycho egomaniac. It's usually like main villains are like, here are crazy people who feel they should rule the world. There's a little bit of that with Magneto, but the difference is with Magneto is Magneto consistently gets proven right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Every other villain is like, you're crazy, Osborn, that won't work, and it doesn't work. Magneto's like, humans are like this. And then throughout the history of the characters and the history of the real world, we go, Magneto's right.
Where's that island? I want to go hang out on Genosha. Fuck all this shit.
Yeah, and so it's one of those and also I think X-Men, the history of the X-Men comics, X-Men was always, and it was only my only issue with, and not even like for the books as they were, but because so many of those image founders had started on the X-Men books kind of changed. Where then, because up to the 70s, up to the image guys, X-Men was the book where artists tried shit.
Yeah.
Where you were like, here's a new guy you've never heard of from Europe who's an artist. Here's a Canadian artist. Here's this guy, that guy. Well, then once X-Men became the biggest book in the world, a lot of times now it's like, here's the biggest artist in the game right now, and he's doing X-Men. And I do kind of miss the day, and I think Remender did that. I think Remender brought on a lot of like interesting different artists where people are like, who's this guy?
Dude, Remender, every book Remender still to this day puts out has the best artist in the biz working on it. He just like...
And I think like, because before X-Force, I didn't know who Esad Ribic was.
Oh, wow, dude.
And I feel like
he kills it.
Oh, I love Ribic now. But it's like, I think like that's the thing I loved about the X-Men growing up was like, that was the book where, because no one had heard of Bill Sienkiewicz's. Bill Sienkiewicz's first thing was New Mutants. Like so many of these like interesting, different, bizarre artists, their first book was X-Men.
Speaking of New Mutants, I think that's the other thing I like about X-Men is when you think about the X-Men family and what they represent, it's almost more than all of the rest of the Marvel Universe combined. Like when you think about everything X-Men encapsulates, and that's part of like going back to the whole like X-Men is an idea.
Yes.
And you can fill it with just about any X-Men. And they all have their own stories, and you can make them the core team, and you can tell a cool story from that.
Yeah.
You know, fucking Phalanx, you know? And like,
Phalanx.
when we talk about New Mutants, like Phalanx, and like, who would have thought that would show up in the fucking, in Hickman's run? Like, he's got so much to pull from, and I think people who might just now be checking out Hickman's run, like, he's pulling stuff just...
left and right
out of all this stuff, but that's what makes X-Men so cool. Is over the years they've got to experiment and do so many different things.
Well, it's that crazy history, and it's always like the most fun stuff to kind of be able to kind of like explore and pull this stuff. And by the way, I'll say side note: if you're all Legion just ended the show, check that show out. It's dope. There's a lot of real cool X-Men stuff, like the fact that there's a live action Shadow King, and it's played by Aubrey Plaza.
I have not. I know, right? I'm just saying that out loud.
Dope.
I haven't got to watch season 3 yet. Somebody tweeted at me today asking if I was caught up. I am not. That's a show I have to pay attention to.
Oh, you have to. Yes, that is not a background show.
And the biggest problem I'm having with content right now is I'm doing so many things at the same time. I have to be able to multitask while I'm watching my shows.
Right.
I just got caught up on Demon Slayer, and that was so tough for me because it's got subtitles. The show's brilliant. It's really good. But it was really hard for me to catch up because it's like, it's subtitles. I can't be working on anything else. I can't multitask this. I have to focus in on it. But I will get to Legion Season 3 soon. But to bring this all back around, also Adam's in the chat. What's up, Adam?
Hey.
He wanted to give a shout out to your shirt. And I did watch The Boys, Fadior. We could probably talk about The Boys, too.
I still need to watch The Boys.
Okay, you haven't watched
but
it.
I'm familiar
did you read
with
the comic?
I did, and
Okay.
it was not. And I like Garth Ennis's kind of madness.
Yeah.
The Boys didn't work for me as a comic.
Me either. But I think some of the changes they made were good. Some of the things they didn't change were bad. But
Interesting.
regardless, so getting back around to all this X-Men stuff and how big of a fan you are, I asked you to come to me today with your 5 favorite X-Men books.
Yes.
You got them.
Yes.
What do you got?
So this was, and I wanted to try and keep it for the most part core X-Men.
Okay.
Like not Wolverine, stuff like that, but try to keep it kind of like here's the team, this is the goal. I did want to bring in one thing from Claremont because it's Claremont and it's classic stuff. I think Dark Phoenix.
So the Dark Phoenix saga.
The Dark Phoenix saga. It's hard because I think a lot of people pick up that trade now, and then they'll go, I don't see what the big deal is. And it's hard because I think for that book to really click, you have to have read a couple of the things before. Like when Jean becomes the Phoenix, when it slowly starts. Because the Dark Phoenix as a book is almost like watching the season finale of a show, and then kind of going like, I was fine, I guess. But I think Dark Phoenix is great, and I think all the stuff after Dark Phoenix with like Scott and other things he's dealing with, and that's the introduction of Kitty Pryde as the Dark Phoenix saga. The Hellfire Club, all this stuff with like there's so much packed within the Dark Phoenix between like Lilandra and the Starjammers, and that's the first time, the Wolverine in the sewers.
Did you fucking hear that Lilandra was originally supposed to be the villain in Dark Phoenix in
the film? Yes.
In the film, and it didn't test well.
Well, it was not just that. I think it was supposed to be Lilandra and the Skrulls.
Right. I did hear that.
Yes.
But to have Lilandra and they go, nah, let's make it this other thing that no one's ever heard of, is the biggest, like, what the fuck is wrong with you?
Yeah.
Just name her Lilandra, and it'll make so much more sense that she's in this movie.
Yeah, I know, 100%. But yeah, I think it's classic John Byrne art too. It's like John Byrne's at the top of his game. It's all the characters. You have Moira, Banshee, the Hellfire Club, the introduction of the Hellfire Club. I love the Dark Phoenix saga. It's like, to me, I'm like, that is prime 80s Marvel, 80s X-Men. It's all the soap opera stuff. Yep, right there at the bottom of the corner. Scott
soap
and Jean
opera.
kissing. And that's what made the X-Men so popular. People forget about that. It's like, the X-Men became so popular because it was a soap opera. Is that the two biggest books of the 80s were this and Teen Titans. The soap opera, romance, who's dating who, how are they dating?
I mean, I had the Uncanny X-Men issue, which is literally an entire issue of them playing basketball.
Yep.
And not using their powers, and like it's a soap opera drama, and they're just playing basketball, and I'm like, okay.
Yeah. And I mean, this is the book that has like the classic Wolverine in the sewer turning around that so many artists have like done that shot.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love this book.
So this is one of your essentials.
This is one of my essentials is Dark Phoenix. Again, Kitty Pryde, young Kitty Pryde, where she's a dancer.
Yeah, I will upset a lot of X-Men purists and saying that I'm not a Claremont fan.
I know a lot of people that aren't. He's very wordy, and it's one of those things where it's like, and he's even wordy for old comics being wordy. He's very wordy, very purple prose kind of a thing. But it works for me. But I will say, this is the main, like, part of the main Uncanny is Dark Phoenix. Along with this also is God Loves Man Kills.
So that's like one of the things I respect about Claremont is what he did for the X-Men.
Yes,
and
for 17 years.
Everlasting stories that he created and how those stories still influence the X-Men universe today.
Oh yeah.
I can respect Claremont. Anytime I pick up a Claremont book, I'm like, I'm bored.
Well, are you talking about Claremont books now or then?
Even back when and my taste changed as I age, obviously.
Yeah.
When I was younger, I was more likely to enjoy X-Force and X-Factor.
Totally.
You know, just because that was, the hotness at the time. It was more, like somebody, when I asked people to share some of their favorite panels and stuff like that, I didn't post this one. And that was that tweet, I was like, I could sit here and post like for 3 or 4 days and just keep going. One of my favorite spreads was from, I think it was it Uncanny X-Men? It was the Phalanx Saga. I can't remember which book, but it's like the spread is like Wolverine jumping out of a plane, and he's like got his parachute on and he's flying.
I feel like that is Phalanx.
Yeah, it's the Phalanx Saga. Oh god, I love it. I always remember that. But that was like, those are the ones I remember the most from childhood, and I think it's because the Claremont books for the most part came out before I was reading X-Men.
Right.
So at the point when I first got introduced to X-Men, it was like the Legacy Virus, the Phalanx Saga.
Oh yeah, all the early '90s stuff. Yeah.
That's when I got introduced to it. So to then go back and read the Claremont stuff, it didn't really click for me. And then as an adult to go back through and try to read everything again, I just feel like after the Grant Morrison run, after even the Whedon run, like there's a snappiness to it and an efficiency that I don't get in the Claremont runs.
Well, it's interesting. I think like the era for me, like even though this is like the classic one, I think for me where things like really start snapping and popping in Claremont stuff is right when he starts launching New Mutants.
Right.
Because it's like, so for people that know, like it's not just that he was on Uncanny for 17 years, which was huge. He was on Uncanny, New Mutants.
I might like his work on New Mutants more.
He ran that corner of the Marvel Universe, which was the Mutants. It was him and Louise Simonson, because Louise Simonson was his editor.
Oh shit.
She was his editor, and
can I really quickly? I don't want to forget.
Yeah.
Moss Baked in the Twitch chat said that tweet brought me here. Thank you.
Yeah,
it never works.
Yeah.
Never does someone follow a random tweet to a show. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for watching.
Thank you for clicking through. You are one of the few.
So
Sorry.
I think it's no, that's great. I think that's awesome. But people I think forget is that it's like, so he was doing Uncanny. He then launches New X-Men. So he's writing New X-Men and Uncanny around the same time. He then launches Excalibur. So he's doing New X-Men. He's doing New X-Men or New Mutants.
Okay.
New Mutants, X-Men, Excalibur at the same time. And then XFactor launches. And XFactor is that's the original 5, and they're starting their own team. And Jean's back. She's not, she's Jean. She's back. She's alive. And the first 12 issues was somebody else, and then his name I can't remember at the moment, the writer. And then somehow Claremont and Louise Simonson were like, maybe we should do this because it's the X-Men. So then Louise Simonson and Walt and Louise Simonson took over that book. So like the Mutants throughout all the 80s was like Claremont and the Simonsons. And it was like, and then they did Power Pack, and Power Pack was loosely connected to the X-Men. So it's very interesting to kind of like read that era when it's like, here's 5 or 6 books written by 2 people. And
it's nuts.
It was like, an Excalibur had a massive run. Like, that's a great book too. If you love like real Britishy kind of stuff, because that's Kitty Pryde and Nightcrawler with Captain Britain. Excalibur's a great read. New Mutants is fantastic as well. But jumping, I had to throw a Claremont in there, but now we're going all modern for the other 4. But do read God Loves Man Kills. God Loves Man Kills is fantastic.
So what's your next? That's one of your essentials.
Going in order, it is going to be the Morrison run.
The Grant Morrison, yep.
The Grant Morrison run. Forgive the fact that the art is highly inconsistent.
Very inconsistent.
If it's not Frank Quitely, there are points where things get pretty brutal. But New X-Men by Grant Morrison,
It's a trip.
It's a trip, and I feel like,
it's a trip.
Again, like my favorite thing about the X-Men is that it's the one book where you can do what if. And I feel like a lot of the 90s was very stuck in, for lack of a better term, gimmicks. And there's characters that were introduced in the 90s that I liked, but it was really like, well, what do we like about Wolverine? He's very popular. Wow, he's mysterious and kind of a badass. So Gambit, so Cable, so Bishop, and it less becomes about what ifs in this world and what do these characters mean, and becomes more about crossovers and fighting and new costumes and all this other stuff. And the X-Men to me is least interesting when it's just about fighting. And have you ever read Morrison's pitch on this?
I haven't read the pitch, no.
So it's in the omnibus, and he basically opens up the book by saying like, X-Men was the first punk rock comic, and it hasn't been punk rock in forever. And I want to make it punk rock again. That's
a very,
very Morrison.
Right. But then I'm like, so it brings in Jean-Luc,
Phantom X.
Phantom X?
Phantom X, yeah.
Which is one of the weirdest characters. For Morrison, it's one thing to say a character is weird, but even for that character to continue in the Marvel world, I always find it really funny when people try to bring Phantom X back into storylines. And I think Remender did it great.
We're going to get into that.
He did a really good job.
Yes.
But to see them bring him back in and be like, I don't fucking, what are we doing? I don't know. What you mean his Eva, or it has entire worlds in there? I don't fucking know. What are we doing with this?
Yeah, but it's that trippy head stuff. And so what I loved is that Morrison then comes in with like, not just one what if, but a couple what ifs. What if Xavier had a twin sister? What if there was a mutant genocide? What if some of the kids started rebelling as teenagers are wont to do? Like all these different, and then what if the second mutation? That was the biggest thing.
Yeah.
He introduced the idea of second mutations with
You get
Beast,
the Beast.
more than anything. But
Just a
like
cat.
these ideas of like, what if, and like smashing it all. And then also he was the one who introduced the idea that maybe Weapon X stood for Roman numeral 10.
Yep.
No one had done that before.
And they're
like,
still running with that.
They're still running with that.
It's a book right now. Captain
Yes.
America's #1.
Yes. And I thought that was a genius idea. And it's all these different things. And everything with like Xavier and everything with like Jean is like so good. Again, the art is highly inconsistent, but when it's Frank Quitely, it's great.
It's great.
And when it's Phil Jimenez, it's great. And that's not to shit on the other artists in between, but just from my understanding, some of them had like 2 weeks to complete a book.
Yeah.
Like this was like that time when it was like, you gotta go. There's no delaying.
I haven't read this in 10 years, and it's bringing back some crazy memories.
I read this entire run. This was in high school. My orchestra teacher was a big comic collector, and he was like, "Oh, have you ever read Grant Morrison's X-Men?" And at that point, I had started picking up some of their comics around the time, and I said, "Oh no, I'm not reading that one yet." And he just gave me the entire run. I think I literally read this in 2 nights, and it's like 40 issues, and I just stormed through that whole thing. But it's great. And also, I like that he brought back the idea, because he also wrote this in his pitch, is that we are too stuck in that, oh, if you have mutant powers, you're automatically going to be ripped and sexy. And Morrison introduced kind of like some gross, like the new Angel, who's like a young girl who can vomit up acid. Beak.
Yeah, Beak is so gross. And I love that in Wolverine and the X-Men, Jason Aaron brought back a lot of those like gross X-Men. And being like, we're teenagers and we're weird. And it's like, it really felt like it was capturing that whole, like, our bodies are changing and that's a weird and gross part of your life.
Yeah, I don't like this. I don't like that this is happening to me. But yeah, Morrison's X-Men was really huge for me in this kind of idea of like doing all these things. And then, yeah, again, the idea of like destroying Genosha. And like, what did that mean? So number 3 for me.
All right, let me... Whew. I will say I liked Grant Morrison's run the first 3 quarters, and I felt it drag towards the end.
Well,
I didn't feel like it ended as strong as I had wanted it to.
No, that's the only thing about the run that doesn't really work. It's a good little twist, but Zorn was Magneto. Doesn't play. Here's the thing, like, and Morrison's talked about it in his, which is kind of like, I love Morrison, but I'm like, this feels oddly ignorant. Is as far as he's concerned, he was going to kill Magneto. So it's like, well, what's the last stand of Magneto? Oh, he would go too far. He would finally become Hitler. He would finally do the thing.
Right.
Well, Marvel didn't even let Magneto be dead for literally a month. 1 month later, he was back in New Excalibur, and it turns out, oh, well, Zorn wasn't really Magneto. That was still Zorn, but it was Zorn's evil twin brother. But none of that was Morrison. That was all Marvel. Yeah. And that's why Morrison, like, I think later that month signed an exclusive with DC. He was pissed. And it does kind of take the oomph out of the last chunk of that book when you're kind of like, oh, well, it's all fake, dude.
Yeah, I was never really a fan of the Zorn Magneto storyline. I love Zorn.
I love Zorn on his own character.
Right,
yes,
and
Zorn
I'm glad that Hickman's bringing Zorn into this run.
I love that.
Okay, so who's next?
I'm Astonishing.
Yeah, with
it's if you read Grant Morrison's, just go right into Astonishing.
It's true.
It's the perfect pickup point. They're dealing with spoilers. New X-Men ends with the death of Jean. She dies. And a fair amount of the first chunk of Astonishing is dealing with the aftermath of Jean's death and Cyclops being with Emma and all this other stuff. And so, and Wolverine's reaction to those kinds of things. But I think Astonishing X-Men is gorgeous. It's a gorgeous book. John Cassaday, this is him like at his top game.
I will say too, I'm not a huge Whedon fan. I'm not one of those people that's like, Whedonverse. Personally, this is my favorite thing that Whedon's ever done.
I agree.
And I'm not a Whedonverse person, but because I live in LA and my friends are nerds, I've watched all of it. I've seen all of Buffy. I've seen all of Angel. Like, I've seen all of his other shows that are extremely subpar. I think he does team stuff really well, and I think that's why he was the right person to come at the Avengers, but I'm so glad he's not the person that continued the Avengers.
I agree.
For the movies.
Yes.
And this is my favorite thing Whedon's ever done. Like, if you like Whedon, I feel like this is him operating at his best.
I think it's continuing those great what ifs. What if there was a mutant cure? What if Cerebro was sentient? And all those kinds of different ideas. This is some great Kitty Pryde stuff.
The Kitty Pryde stuff in this is so fucking good.
Well, and everything
God.
with Colossus is so heartbreakingly sad. And then when they finally do sleep together and she phases through the floor, and then Wolverine's just sitting there eating breakfast and goes, finally. His Wolverine's great. I think his Wolverine's fantastic. Beast is great when but everything that's leading to then the final arc. And that's the thing is like the final arc, unlike New X-Men, which I think is like has a great start, all the Morrison stuff, and then the end kind of gets a little iffy. This I think is consistently really strong. And
Yes.
stuff that you might think doesn't work, you're kind of like, well, then comes back in the final arc, and you're like, that's rad. I think there's one of my favorite scenes.
Oh God, I love this.
Is when but it's in the final arc. It's when Cyclops is faking out the villain that his powers don't work anymore, and then it's revealed that Emma's turned them off. So she turns them on, and he blasts the dude through like the roof. It's so dope. It's so good. The art's great. John Cassaday is sort of a hit and miss artist lately. It feels like occasionally he's doing stuff, but this is planetary John Cassaday. It's so good. And yeah, Beast continuing on. Like I love when the villain takes Beast's humanity away, so he kind of just becomes this feral creature. Attacks Wolverine, I think, at one point. Becomes like this cat, this like insane cat. But yeah, I think Astonishing X-Men is really great. And then this is the thing where it's like there's a couple of years post Astonishing where I think writers and great writers were trying stuff, and I don't think anything really clicked. They had the X-Men move to San Francisco.
Yep.
And that was
They were like a sanctuary city.
Yeah, and it was Fraction and Brubaker, who are two amazing writers.
Unbelievably great writers.
Their Iron Fist is amazing. Fraction's Hawkeye is great. Their X-Men just didn't click. It wasn't bad. It just never felt like it did anything. It felt like it was kind of an even wave. Like it never felt like if you right now outside of Again, what we talked about is like, well, they moved to San Francisco, and also they got plagued, I think, by a lot of crossovers. They had the crossover that killed Nightcrawler. They had the crossover that brought back Kitty. They had the crossover that brought in Hope. Like they were stuck in a lot of stuff for a while.
Yeah, and I feel like you and I are about to go down the same track. It's around that time where the X-Men books weren't doing it for me, but the Side X books were.
Jason Aaron's Wolverine, which is not one of my picks because I'm taking out.
I love Wolverine in the X-Men.
That's in my pick, but that's not yet. But Jason Aaron's straight up Wolverine was fantastic, so good. Everything he was doing with Wolverine was so dope. So that was the X-Men book I was reading when I wasn't reading the main series. But then Rick Remender does Uncanny X-Force.
I knew you were gonna do it. And I am a Remender fanboy, so anytime anyone brings up Remender, I'm like, yep.
I have gone on record, even on El Rey, so it's on TV. It lives forever. Uncanny X-Force is my all-time favorite X-Men thing. I think, and it's something that I think you only realize when you read the whole run, is I think there's something genius to the fact that Rick Remender took what is essentially supposed to be the badass murder team. It's like, oh, here's the X-Men that kill, and Cyclops has to send them out on missions because it's wet. It's Black Ops. It's wet. They can't be connected to the X-Men. This
is also when I started to like Cyclops.
Oh yeah.
As much as the X-Men books, I feel like for the last 10 years have not been great for me, what has happened to Cyclops, I love.
Oh yeah.
And like him becoming this kind of like dick who's
which
a
is very
Magneto
controversial,
in training.
Controversial for a lot of people. I dig that stuff too. But with Uncanny X-Force, I think the idea that Remender took like the Black Ops murder team, which I think would appeal to mostly
God, I love the art in this book.
It's so good. Young male comic readers who are going to go, oh, they're the badass kill team. Remender took this book and made it a book about anti-violence and how violence is not a good idea and how it just begets more violence and murder. And I think that's so subversively genius, and it's not something you realize until you reach the end of the book of like, oh, he's been making a point this entire time. It's not just this is a great X-Men book.
It messed up all of them.
It messed up all of them. So the first volume is he asks the question again, what if? It's the question we've asked in our own lives. If you could kill Hitler as a kid, would you? So remember, that's the first volume, but it's not Hitler, it's Apocalypse. They find Kid Apocalypse, and the question is, if you found the person who would destroy you, would you kill them as a child? And they go, yes. And it's then the massive fallout from what happens to that, to Wolverine, to especially Angel, to Psylocke.
Phantom X was fine.
The Phantom X ends up being great, and like the last half. And honestly, it's the one like I like a lot of Deadpool. This is my favorite Deadpool. Deadpool in this book, because Deadpool's the one character when like the rest of the team is like.
This is not the Deadpool who breaks the fourth wall to make jokes at you.
No,
not this.
He's
book.
comedic, but he's comedic with the other characters. He's not talking to the game. And so the fact that the one character that's like, we shouldn't have done that. We shouldn't have done that. Is Deadpool was great. The fact that it's the Merc with the mouth who's like, we killed a kid. That was not okay. Is so great. And then they go to this alternate universe where it's like, what happens if they continue down this road? And it shows like Betsy is like this new dictator, and Wolverine has to deal with the death of his son, and what does that mean, and who is he as a father? It's genius. I think it's literally a genius piece of work. And the fact that he used the violent murder team to say violence and murder is bad is so good, and I feel like I don't hear anybody talking about it.
I mean, it was a heavily talked about book when it came out.
Yes,
I remember it when I was hitting up my weekly comic book spot. This was like,
yeah, and a lot of that was also due to the art. The art is so good in this book. The dark, and this was called the Dark Angel Saga, and everything with Angel and Betsy is so heartbreaking. Especially, there's a scene where Psylocke has her and Angel live an entire life within their head, and it's so beautiful and so sweet.
I forgot about that.
That was the panel I sent. The panel I sent was her having them live an entire life. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful piece of work. It's my all-time favorite X-Men thing ever. And I think you should all go check it out. And the one-off that is Wolverine hunts down a Nazi for Magneto is also really, really great. And the Dean White colors on Rivic's art and everything, it's all so good. And then my final one, leading from this.
Okay, all right, hold on.
And so these last four, I've tried to give you like, just read these four, and you'll be all good with the X-Men. You can go right into Hickman after these four. So again, it's New X-Men, Astonishing, Uncanny X-Force. And my final one is Wolverine and the X-Men.
Nice!
Again, the big what if. What if Wolverine had to run the school?
Which, and in principle, when I first heard of this book, I was like, this is dumb. And then I found out Jason Aaron was writing it, and I went, okay, I'll check it out.
Yes.
And surprisingly, despite it being Wolverine and the X-Men, I felt like it was the most fun someone had been having with the X-Men since I could remember it as a kid.
I think
so much fun.
Wolverine, Kitty, Iceman were so great in this book. The new Hellfire Club. I love the introduction of the kids, especially.
The Hellfire Club as kids was great.
The Hellfire Club as kids, and then the kids within the book. Quentin Quire, who was from New X-Men, as he continues onto this book, Kid Apocalypse. Again, this is why you want to read Uncanny X-Force first, so you understand Kid Apocalypse. And then Brood. I love Brood in this book.
Kid Brood is so good.
It's a wonderful book, and this was coming out at the same time. So honorable mentions. This was coming out at the same time as the Bendis stuff. So the latter half of this does deal with the young X-Men and Cyclops and Magneto. So you'll probably, and I did like the Bendis stuff
and the Schism stuff.
So you might need to read that along. But I honestly think if you just pick up, these are the four more recent big X-Men runs: New, Astonishing, Uncanny X-Force, Wolverine and the X-Men. I think, and they all have definitive endings. They all have, that's the end of that run. So if you want to jump off, you can, but I think like these four.
So speaking of this run,
yes,
Voltron Iceman is in the new HeroClix set. You know, at the end of Wolverine and the X-Men, when Iceman makes the giant Voltron version of himself,
yes,
to fight the Krakoas, that giant figure is in the new HeroClix set. It's literally good. Voltron Iceman.
I love that too. I love Logan at the beginning of this series going up to Iceman and going, "You gotta step up," like. And when Iceman's like, "What are you talking about?" And Wolverine's like, "You're probably the most powerful among us, and all you do is make snowballs. You need to step up." Beast is all great in this run too. Yeah, it's a fantastic run. Oh yeah, I forgot about
Janitor Toad.
Janitor Toad is so good. It's what I love about like a great X-Men book. is that the tone can be, because even Uncanny, with all the stuff I talked about with Uncanny X-Force, it is still sometimes blisteringly funny. And then it can be amazingly heartbreaking, like within the next issue. I think it's so good. And I think these 4 runs are the best modern X-Men stuff. Again, there's a lot of cool stuff in the Bendis stuff, but then there was a lot of crossovers and stuff that kind of got mixed in. After that, after the Bendis run, you then had, that's when you got into the...
I forgot all about this too. We've got Warbird.
Oh, the Kid
Omega, or what is it? It's,
Kid Guardian.
Kid Guardian, yeah.
Kid Guardian is so good. And after that, you then get, after this whole run and Schisms and all these other things, that's when you got into the push for the Inhumans. And the X-Men were kind of falling back, and they killed Wolverine and all these other things. And then after that, valiant effort. I think there was actually a lot of good stories. Is they did the relaunch of X-Men Gold, Blue, and Red.
Yeah.
And great writers on that. Charles Soule, I think, was one of the writers as well. Gold was by Mark Guggenheim. Mark Guggenheim, I liked a lot of his ideas. He had some cool stuff. Blue is actually my favorite one, which dealt with more of the young X-Men still being in our time. Which I love Beast as the Sorcerer Supreme. I thought that was great. Young Beast being trained by Doctor Strange. I was like, that's a cool little thing. And that's where we also got that Iceman comes out. We got that in there. And then also this idea that like maybe Jean, because they're now in this new time and they say who Cyclops is, falls in love with Beast instead of young Scott Summers. It's like, well, that's not how that's supposed to happen. And so like there's all these interesting ideas. But yeah. For me, my 5 are Dark Phoenix, because I got to throw a Claremont in there. And then from there, new, astonishing, Uncanny X-Force, Wolverine, and the X-Men.
That's a good list, and honestly, I would have picked the exact same list outside of Dark Phoenix. And I'm trying to think what I would replace with it instead of Dark Phoenix. Ooh, this is a tough one.
And I'll say, if you are somebody who's like, man, this all sounds really kind of cool and interesting, but I don't know, blah, blah, I will highly recommend. Have you been reading X-Men Grand Design?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got it. We've shown it on the channel before.
Pick up X-Men Grand Design.
If you want a history of the X-Men and a great way to kind of go back through. It's the same guy that did hip-hop.
History of Hip-Hop.
History of Hip-Hop. Won an Eisner for that.
Yeah, X-Men Grand Design goes through all of this stuff, and he's got 2 more issues, I think, afterwards. And if you go get the physical books are like these giant coffee table books, which I'm probably going to pick up for myself. But those are great, and that shows you the whole history of the X-Men. But yeah, those are my 5. And again, like honorable mentions, Jason Aaron's just solo Wolverine is so good.
Man, I'm having a hard time thinking about what I would replace Dark Phoenix with. And that's the thing, like I was telling you, like I've read so much X-Men, as we both have, I'm sure. Just like all through my life, I've read X-Men. I've at least been on the X-Men train since Civil War. Honestly, since Inhumans kind of came in and they were like, let's make the Inhumans the new X-Men.
Yeah.
I jumped ship.
Yeah.
That was in 2016. And Blue and Gold, I read a couple issues, but it didn't pull me back in.
I think now that it's over, Blue is worth a check out.
Okay.
I think now that it's over. But
I did read some of the most recent run where Wolverine is back and Cyclops and Wolverine have kind of teamed up and they're on the run. And I'm trying to remember what the name of that run is. I've got it in my Comixology account. I read it all and I was like, you know, this is actually, it's decent as just a good Wolverine and Cyclops team up story. But it didn't have that holding power that the best X-Men books have.
Yeah, the other series I really loved, and I felt like this was one where I'm like, nobody was talking about this. I just want to make sure I get the name of the writer, because I think it was Zed. So I think it was, and I'm gonna find out if I was completely wrong about this. Zed Wells wrote. Zed Wells' New Mutants is so good.
Oh, yeah.
So dope. I heard no one talking about this because it was coming around the same time as Astonishing and a lot of the other big X-Men books. But Zed Wells' stuff on New Mutants was so dope. And the art was so killer. And that had a lot of great stuff with Legion and Danny Moonstar and all that stuff.
I'm trying to remember who wrote it, but one of my favorite runs might have been before Marvel Now, and it might have been Peter David too, XFactor. When it was
XFactor, Peter David's XFactor stuff is so good.
That might be the one where it's Peter David's XFactor, where they're the detective agency, and Madrox and his gang are just.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I fucking love those books a lot, and I felt like that was Peter David at his pinnacle of writing.
And I think like again, even 80s New Mutants from Claremont, the Demon Bear Saga, is so weird and trippy and great. I love that stuff too. And honestly, like if we're talking about the big crossovers, I think it helps to have knowledge and history of the X-Men, but Age of Apocalypse is dope.
It's stupid.
Oh yeah.
It's real dumb, but it's fun.
But it only works. It only works if you know the X-Men. If you have no knowledge and you're picking up Age of Apocalypse.
My favorite books to pick up when I was a kid was the 2099 stuff.
Oh yeah.
And the Age of Apocalypse stuff. Just because it was so just like, what is going on?
Oh yeah.
I have all of X-Men 2099, and it's trash.
There are books I'm not joking. It's not good, but it's like of a time. I have the entire Onslaught omnibus.
Oh yeah, I do too back home.
And I'm just like, this is
Onslaught's special.
Oh yeah, Onslaught is something else. And it's like, I can admit it don't work. But
what would happen if Xavier and Magneto? Again, what if?
Yeah, what if?
What if?
It's all about the what if stuff, and that's why it's like, and I mean, and that's the only reason I didn't include like Wolverine, like main Wolverine titles, is like that has Greg Rucka's Wolverine was so dope a couple years ago. That's an entire run on its own. I love that book.
And honestly, okay, looking through this list, X-Men Legacy Legion was really good.
Yeah, Simon Sperry. Yep.
That was really good. That was strong. That's a strong book. There's a lot of good X-Men books out there.
Yeah, this is when you get like Utopia, the Avengers and X-Men, that stuff where I'm like, that's part of the whole Dark Avengers era.
Yeah.
And it's like, but I literally can't remember anything about it.
I wasn't as big a fan of Legion Quest. I didn't get super into Legion Quest. I mean, I guess I could just pull this up and just show you guys what I'm kind of just going through here, and I'm trying to see if there was anything else that stood out. And see, okay, this was a good example. I love Brian Wood's X-Men, but I never felt like this book was allowed to go anywhere.
No.
So X-Men #1, I have every variant of that cover up in one of those boxes. I have every variant of X-Men #1 with Brian Wood. I think he's great. I think he's a great writer of X-Men, but I don't feel like he was ever allowed to take that book anywhere and do anything really fucking cool with it.
And I don't know if that's what part of the issue of being on the non-main book is what happens. Because you can't really come in with a storyline that's going to change. You can't do a big time travel, crazy, change the world storyline because you're not an Uncanny.
Yeah.
And then how's that going to affect Uncanny? So that becomes its own thing. I do love the Mutant Massacre. The Mutant Massacre, 80s era Mutant Massacre is so great. Fatal Attraction when they take the adamantium out of Wolverine and he becomes more ape-like.
So many people like replied to me with that. And let's get real for a little bit. So I put out a tweet the other day that had like 300 replies.
Yeah.
Of people's favorite panels and or splash pages. And I think the thing that made me the most sad was most of it was from the 90s. And it was a lot of stuff from like people's childhoods. And some of them were people...
It's that impact.
But at the same time, I'm like, y'all ain't reading fucking comics. And the amount of stuff that is out right now that is pushing the envelope art-wise. I mean, pushing the fucking envelope and doing crazy stuff. I feel like I say this all the time, now is the best time for comics. Every week I pick up a new indie book that I end up putting down and being like, what is that?
Yep.
How did this get published? This is amazing. How many dicks did you see this week?
Oh, more than I thought I would.
You know, like,
and I'm not hating if y'all like some dick, but I was just shocked.
White Trees.
I didn't think it was going to be happening.
White Trees will surprise you.
White Trees was really,
there's
really
a lot
good.
of dick in that book. But what I mean is just like there's stuff that's happening that I think artistically people are pushing the envelope. Coloring has come so far.
Coloring is the best it's ever been.
Oh my God, it's just so beautiful. And the fact that you're getting this stuff so fast, you're holding this art in your hands. I mean, you were talking about Assad Ribic, like every book that he's on right now.
Which did he or another Remender guy just put out a Conan book yesterday, right?
I wouldn't doubt it. Freaking doubt it.
Pull that up.
It would be today.
Yeah.
But I was a little sad to see just how few people were showing panels of the last like 5 years or the last 6 years. And I feel like every week I pull up a panel, and we used to do this on the pool, and maybe I'll do it here now. My favorite art of the week. Like my favorite like sequence and art of the week, because We used to do that, and it might be worth bringing that back up because
that's not a bad
I want
idea.
you all to appreciate some of the new stuff that's happening and how people are pushing the format.
Yeah, there's some amazing stuff. Yep, it's horrific. Both wrote and drew this Conan book.
Oh, the Conan Exodus one?
Yep.
Yeah, looks like his stuff. So beautiful.
Conan's been killing
so
lately,
beautiful.
too. Conan's been real good.
So I think it's time now for us to just go in and start talking about all the stuff that we picked up on our pool this week and that we are able to check out.
Well,
and
do we want to really briefly talk about Hickman? What Hickman's doing since we just did that big X-Men
No,
talk?
we'll do that at the end
We'll
because I
flow
know
it in.
it's
We'll
going
flow
to
it
take
in. Great.
forever. If anything, we took way too long to get here. It's almost 6:30.
Ooh.
Yeah, we took a while.
Ooh.
So I'll blaze through this really fast, and then we'll talk about Hickman at the end here.
Sweet.
So, Unearthed #2, this is an indie book coming out from Image, written by Colin Bunn, and art by Kyle Strom. Now, Kyle Strom did a really great book a couple years back, Spread. I think it was Spread, maybe?
Oh, okay.
It's a horror book. Unearthed is a horror book, and it's a fun horror book. If
Horror
you
books
dig-
the last like 10 years have been dope.
Oh, there's so much good stuff. And I think, again, that's because the art is advancing, and you're getting all this cool
You read
experiment.
Witches, right?
Yes.
Chuck, and, oh.
Yes.
That's Witches has panels that have not left my brain at all.
I feel like that with Junji Ito.
Oh, yeah.
When I read Junji Ito,
yeah.
and I know Junji Ito's old school, but Junji Ito has panels that
It's
are
those
like
eyes. It's the eyes.
they're in my brain for fucking ever.
It's those wide, unblinking eyes with tiny pupils where you're like, Jesus, Jesus God.
Unearthed #2 is absolutely great. It's continuing this horror trend. The scientists are trapped underground. You start to learn a little bit more about what's going on there, and it doesn't advance the story too much from issue 1. But there's a lot of really fun moments in it, and it feels like, whereas issue 1 had a lot of new ideas, issue 2 is a lot of like, okay, let's bring out some of these horror cliches and throw them in the book to kind of set the setting for you and remind you this is a horror book. It's not all going to be like crazy sci-fi ideas. This is a horror story, and they establish that through the cliches.
Yeah, I gotta check that one out because reading the summary, I'm like, oh, it kind of sounds like, which a good thing to me is, I'm like, it sounds like a little bit like Annihilation.
Kind of, a little bit,
Yeah.
honestly. White Trees #1 from
This
Chip
is
Zdarsky.
the dick book we were talking
A
about.
lot of dick.
But
A
really
lot of
good,
dick.
really good. Really
great
good book.
I won't open it because it'll violate terms of service. A lot of hard dick in this book. If you're okay with hard dick, it's a really well-written book and really well drawn. The basic idea is that you have these famous heroes from and it's only going to be a 2-part series.
Yeah, the second issue comes out in September, the next month. So I'm a little bit like, part of me is almost like, I'm a little bit surprised they didn't release this as just an original graphic novel. If it's going to be 2 issues old, but I'm not mad about it.
More power to them. I
Yeah.
think that's like things like Comixology. I think are leading to a lot of these smaller runs.
Yeah.
But it's a cool story. I like some of the stuff that's going on in there, where it's basically these old warriors for a kingdom get called in by the king. Their kids have been kidnapped by the opposing army, and they have to go save them.
Yep.
And I like some of the reveals and how the story kind of structured out that like 2 of these old warriors are a like gay couple, and you meet
Yes.
his ex-wife, and he has a daughter, and how that kind of relationship fares. But I love how it's like, at its heart, it seems like it's a story about fatherhood.
Yes.
And coming to terms with being a father and how that changes you as a warrior and as a person. And I thought there were some really great moments there in the story, like when he lets the dragon go.
Oh, I love that. I thought that was fantastic.
So
Letting the
good.
dragon go, and I do kind of like, I mean, we're making jokes about it, but in all honesty, I do like the trope of like, oh, the haunted forest, but it's not haunted because it's going to kill you, it's haunted because it's going to fuck
It's
you.
gonna fuck you.
And I'm like, that's a fun little twist on that
Yeah.
trope, on that fantasy trope.
Yeah. Give in to your desires.
But it's a beautiful, beautiful book. I love the art, and I love the way that the story was coming out. I thought it was really, really great.
Yeah.
I loved it.
It's actually really well done. I don't think either of us got a chance to read The Flash.
Did not.
But as you can assume, Silver Surfer Black, when we talk about art and why when people aren't posting stuff from modern books, Tradmore is a great example. I didn't
this
see
is insane.
in that whole 300 replies, not a single person posted a Tradmore sequence.
Yeah.
That hurt my heart. That lets me know people aren't reading comic books from the last couple years, because Tradmore does stuff that I'm like, it's on a fucking another level.
It's so good, and it's so visually just...
Look at that shit!
It's so trippy.
Look at that shit!
It's so good and so trippy, and it feels appropriately both very 70s, which is Silver Surfer, but also very now,
Yeah.
which I love. Donny Cates is just
Nailing it right now,
I love
isn't
Donny
he?
Cates' work, and I love that Donny Cates can be in like his Ghost Rider stuff very funny And then in this, it's very head trippy and weird. And I love that about the Silver Surfer as a character, that you can do this kind of stuff and you just kind of go, yeah, this feels very European.
Yeah.
You know, it feels like something you would read in like heavy metal and something like that.
This sequence.
Yeah.
Look at this shit.
Him going into ego, to
drilling
try and
into
cure
ego.
him. Yeah.
I won't reveal what's at the end of the book though. I'll save that for you to read it yourself. But you cannot go wrong with Silver Surfer Black. It's only 3 issues in.
It's amazing.
Pick it up. Did you go back and read 1 and 2?
Yes.
Oh man.
And also, honestly, a big credit to Marvel. Sometimes we'll put out like Silver Surfer 1. Again, this like really trippy, you're looking at this book. They will put in a director's cut where it's here's the script. So you actually get to see how that book was written, which I think as a writer, I love seeing that because I'm always like, if you're the artist, like what did this book say? Like what was the script you got that then made you draw these like kaleidoscopy, insane-y kind of things? It's a great script. It's very fascinating.
Jacob over in YouTube chat says, looks like the guy was on something when he drew the comic, but yes, very good art. You need to, Trad Moore is amazing.
Trad Moore is very good.
Don't discredit the artist by saying he had to use drugs to do work like that. Trad Moore has been making killer work since Luther Strode came out. Luther Strode's amazing.
As someone who occasionally enjoys a drink or two, maybe we're in California, maybe the occasional inebriation, you just want to take a nap? You're not really wanting to kind of like sit there and detail out. Now, if it was spray paint art, maybe. Maybe like Dayglow spray paint, I'd be like, yeah, you did.
That's some fine work right there. So I will say, Trad Moore, if you check out Luther Strode, it's super violent, super crazy.
Yeah, but it's great.
But he also did amazing work on Ghost Rider for a little while. So good. Road of Bones #4 is a horror book. I didn't get a chance to read this one. I ran out of time. It's a very text-heavy book, but it's a horror book that I think you will enjoy. You read Punisher Kill Crew, correct?
Love Punisher Kill Crew. Punisher Kill Crew, man, I love the Punisher generally, but I love when they can kind of put the Punisher in, for lack of a better term, heavy metal, crazy scenarios. I love Remender's Punisher run. Anytime they have the Punisher doing like insane stuff, the fact that he hits a frost giant with a car and then shoots him in the head, it's so good.
I didn't read this one because I knew you would. I was like, Cameron's got this
I love this. It was like, it just went right into my grindhouse alley. Whenever the people are writing the Punisher, now you can do like, and I love Garth Ennis's like Punisher, which can be very sad and very like inward and very much like the Netflix series. But I also do have a soft spot for whenever they go grindhouse with the Punisher. And then stuff like this, yeah, where the Punisher is like taking kids out to a diner to eat. And kids are drawing what killed their parents. Go to the next one. Because then you get to see.
Oh, no.
Yeah. he shoots the skeleton demon. Oh, it's so good. And then he fights a demon tree in a Punisher book. The top panel. I love it. I love this book. And it's only the first issue. It's 5-issue miniseries, but so good. Anytime you do stuff that's like Grindhouse Punisher, I'm like, I'm in.
Yeah,
I love that.
I figured this was gonna be.
You go to the last page. You got to see. You got to see.
Okay. All right. Is it something I should reveal for them?
And then go next because you see the covers of the next issue, which is even better. Yeah, click one more to see the cover. That's fantastic.
Okay.
That was probably the most fun I had reading anything this week. That was the most fun.
To me, what makes all this even more special is knowing that Cosmic Ghost Rider is a thing right now, which is just Frank Castle.
That's also Frank Castle. I love that. I love
what Marvel's like, you know what? Maybe Frank's a little problematic in today's day and age. Let's just go batshit crazy with him.
Yeah. He's going to be like the most heavy metal weird character.
Cool with it. All right, so we're gonna skip that.
Yes.
Once and Future #1.
Talked a little bit about this at the start.
Awesome. It's really good. It surprisingly talks a lot about current issues going on in Britain and relatably even in America.
Yep.
With I mean, it just comes right out and is like, yo, Excalibur maybe not was the greatest guy in the world considering he wanted to cleanse Europe of all
everyone else.
Everyone else.
Yeah.
And if a group of white nationalists are trying to bring Excalibur back, this is why we should stop them. It's definitely a comment on Brexit, and it's a comment on a lot of things that are going on right now in a really interesting and weird kind of take.
Yeah, and I mentioned before at the beginning that it's like I usually stay away from Kieran Gillen's stuff until it's traded, if it's not Marvel and DC, because his stuff can get kind of like deep and heady and kind of like, what's going on?
Also, I know we have a lot of Power Rangers fans in the audience. Dan Mora did the art.
This was a very clean read. I felt like, oh great, I'm not sitting here going like, wait, what kind of a thing.
I love the grandma character who's like, you haven't got to this scene yet, and it's great. They're just basically very bluntly talking. Oh, and she shoots him. It's great. I definitely this surprised me. This was my surprise pick of the week in regards to not knowing anything about it going into it and coming out of it very excited about the next issue.
That's great.
Okay, next up. Miles Morales' Spider-Man number 9 was on my list. I've been keeping up with this.
I have not been.
It's really well done. And whereas I felt like Bendis was starting to get a little stale on Miles with his voice, the voice is right there. Like you're like, I hear this is Miles. This issue is really interesting because I know we talked about the last issue on this show where he was being held captive and experiments were being done on him. And this issue, his dad and his uncle come to save him. And that's pretty much it.
Love that.
Loki number 2.
Read the first and second for this.
The first full shot you have of Loki in this book, I'll pull it up for you because I was like, I feel like the writer's been holding on to this, or the artist, whichever one decided to do
Someone
this.
was sitting on this.
Sitting on this for a while. So I'll cut to it here. So it starts here. Mr. Stark expecting me, and then it's that. Mm-hmm. And you're like, okay, this book knows what it is.
Low-key.
This book's having some fun with itself, for sure.
Oh, yeah. No, super fun, super silly. 2 issues, both issues are really, really great. And what you're talking about, bringing in Nightmare, who's not a villain I'm overly familiar with, honestly.
Right, Nightmare's a big 80s villain, and I love Nightmare. I love me some Nightmare in my books. So he kind of came up in War of the Realms.
Right.
They kind of brought Nightmare back front and center in War of the Realms, and I'm excited to see now Nightmare is becoming more of a mainstay villain again. Good times.
But great stuff. It's Tony Stark and Loki. You see on the cover, but most of the book is them talking, and it's really funny, great stuff.
Okay, I picked up Immortal Hulk Director's Cut.
So I have not been reading Al Ewing's Hulk stuff, but everyone's telling me I need to get on it.
So I'm really bummed that I didn't get a chance to read this because they have been really solid.
Because I hear it's Hulk horror, and I'm all about that.
It is basically just horror.
I love that.
It's body horror, all that good stuff. I didn't read all the way through Gwenpool Strikes Back, but I'm going to pull up a panel for Cameron to read really quick because it's a hell of a way to start a book. It's a really weird way to start a book. So we're going to go right here.
Have you ever looked at a really pregnant lady and had the urge to squeeze her like a toothpaste tube? Follow-up question, do the doctors who deliver babies get the same kind of satisfaction high as a pimple-popping doctors?
I read that and I was like, oh, this is going to be an interesting issue.
Yeah.
Okay.
Gasp, wait. Am I internal monologuing right now? Does that mean... It does. Oh my God. Hi, we're in a Gwenpool solo story. I'm Gwenpool.
Yep.
Is this going to be a one-shot? Let me just take a quick peek at the title page and say, oof, okay. Not too sounding grateful, but... This is a cold open.
Yeah, so that first panel, I was like, all right, I will check this out later. But that was an interesting descriptive to start the book. I don't know too much about that. I'm not a huge fan of the Gwenpool stuff. I feel like Deadpool's been a little overdone in the last year.
I don't disagree.
I don't know if you got a chance to read this one, Cameron.
Ghosted in LA. I picked it up. I did not get a chance to read it.
I love this book. I really liked issue 1, and issue 2 I thought was just great. It's a sweet book. It's kind-hearted. It's just dealing with a girl who just moved to LA. Her boyfriend broke up with her after she's like going to school at USC or something like that. Her boyfriend broke up with her, and she's here all by herself, and she doesn't know anyone. And LA is this city that's really hard to make connections in.
Oh, that's great.
And she makes connections with a group of ghosts living in a mansion.
I love that. It kind of has a look. It's a very different kind of artist, but it kind of reminds me of the Hernandez brothers. They're kind of Love and Rockets.
Yep.
Kind of style.
Very
stuff,
Love and Rockets.
And I love that.
Have you been reading Gideon Falls?
I've been hearing a lot about it.
Oh boy, I need to get you on Gideon Falls. So maybe I can let you borrow. I've got all of them.
Okay.
And Gideon Falls is one of my favorite indie books out right now. And this is another book when we start talking about art and the shit that's going on in indie comics right now,
Gideon Falls is on it.
Oh, I'm just gonna browse through some pages of shit. I mean, it's just always killer. It's always killer.
Wow.
With, I mean, it's
I
a
love
horror.
that.
It's a horror book.
Yeah.
And the way it does panels and the way it tries to bring you into this world of the Black Barn and the stuff that's going on. Oh,
That's great. I love that.
It is good shit. This is like the brightest issue yet because it's going back to his childhood before the Black Barn took him. But we do get some more Black Barn stuff, and each issue has a couple Black Barn segments that are just
That's great.
fucking insane. Oh, there's
No,
a good one.
I'll check that one out.
There's a
Check
good one
this
with
out
his
for
father
sure.
a little bit. Yeah. This one. Love it.
That's amazing.
So good. I was really happy to see one person on that tweet put Little Bird, and Little Bird is another indie book that has some of the best art I've seen. So good. Okay, so I think we're just about through.
So
You read Batman.
I'll talk about Batman Universe. Batman Universe, I did see Event Leviathan. I'm reading Bendis' Superman stuff in trade, so I'm not at Leviathan yet. But that said, another Bendis book, Batman Universe. Batman Universe is the book that was exclusively being sold in Walmart a couple months ago, along with Superman Up and Away by Tom King.
Okay.
It was exclusive to Walmart, and now they have started putting it out digitally.
Got it.
Batman Universe, I love. It is, I want to make sure I get the artist's name on this, but it's a Batman story that's like the Riddler. It opens up, the first issue was the Riddler, and it seemed like, oh, the Riddler might be involved with something, and so Batman's trying to find out, and it ends up becoming this chase across like not just Gotham, but the world. We check out the art, it's so good.
Okay. Very
Yeah, very that kind of like, it's not quite Frank Quitely or Raphael Grampa, but it's kind of that kind of scratchy, Batman has like a beard, that kind of stuff.
I don't have that one to show you guys, unfortunately.
Yeah, but it's so good. Darrington is the artist. But I love it. And what I love about all the stuff that Bendis is doing in DC, but especially in this book, is that because he had spent so much time at Marvel, now in his DC books, he's like, I'm going to play with everything. I'm doing all of it. So it's like, this is a Batman book, but Batman's fighting Green Arrow. And then in pops in Vandal Savage. And then the book ends with Batman going to Gorilla City.
Of course.
And then, it turns out, the egg took him, and now he's in the future in Thanagar. And so I love that Bendis is like, I'm going to play with everything. By also doing like his Young Justice book. Have you been reading his Young Justice?
I'm reading no DC right now. Adam handles the
His
DC
Young
for
Justice
us.
is so good. It's the team. Half of the team realizes that something is wrong. Like they're not. Like half the team remembers the continuity before the New 52, and half the team doesn't. So it's becoming this like, why do some of us have memory, some of us don't? So they start doing this universe jumping. In the last issue, they landed in the Kingdom Come universe, and Bendis' creation of Ginny Hex. Jonah Hex's great-granddaughter. She has this box with her that she's been hiding or keeping with her, and she won't let anyone look at it. And then the Dr. Fate of the Kingdom Come universe grabs the box. It's a very Pulp Fiction moment, opens it, and there's this light that hits him, and he closes the box and goes, we need to get them out of here right now. These people need to leave. They can't be here. And immediately tries to get the Young Justice out of there. Bendis' stuff is great. But this Batman book, what I really, really, really love about it is it feels very much, if anybody watched the cartoon, a Brave and the Bold style Batman.
Yeah.
In that he's very conversational.
Very Adam West Batman.
Very conversational, very funny. So it's like Green Arrow gets taken over by this stuff, and he starts trying to attack Batman. Batman subdues him, and the end of the issue is, did I jump you back there? Yes. Did I win? Of course. I feel shame. And then there's this moment where Green Arrow's talking to Batman, and he goes, hey, have you heard from Clark lately? And Batman goes, yes, almost every day. And Green Arrow goes, great, I guess he's just ignoring me then. So it's these great little Bendis-y asides, but because I hear what you're saying when it was Bendis on the X-Men, after a while they all start to feel the same. Because this is like a short, fun little miniseries.
But I feel like that was mainly because at that time he had like 6 books coming out in Marvel.
He has that now happening, which is interesting. He's got 2 Superman books, Young Justice, Naomi, and then he's got his indie stuff that's coming out through DC.
Yeah.
He's got the same thing happening, but right now he's firing on all cylinders. I don't know if it's because they're new characters that he's getting to play with for the first time.
Yeah.
He's probably had these ideas forever. But yeah, Batman, his Batman book is so good if you're big into like that kind of Brave and the Bold style, conversational Batman universe. Really, really fun 2 issues. Go check it out. Love the art. Love the art.
All right, it's time. let's talk about some Powers of X, Powers of 10.
Number 2.
Number 2, technically book 4 in this series from Jonathan Hickman. There's a lot of shit going on in this book. It's a lot to juggle. Whereas already we got introduced last book to 10 storylines.
Yes.
This one has 4 timelines.
Yes.
X0, X10, X100, and X1000.
Yes.
And how we're kind of interacting between all of those. I love that we start right off with kind of where we ended.
Where we left off, yeah.
With Mariah telling Xavier, like, look into my mind, and now Xavier's going to Magneto. So we're getting a little bit more insight into what leads to year 10 in this world. The biggest question I have coming out of this, with some of the things that we see in this issue, is X100 and X1000 Life 10 of Moira?
Yes, is this all the same timeline?
Is it all the same timeline?
And I don't know. And that's going to be kind of the interesting thing. By the way, can you jump ahead just a little bit when we get Magneto takes his helmet off? I love the art in both these books. I love that it's very, it feels very imminent-y. But I will say, Magneto looks like an anime boy.
Yeah, I know.
And I know it's because of that long Magneto hair, but he looks like an anime boy. And that's not a criticism of the art, just made me laugh. But this is, of the 4 issues, this is probably, I still really like this one. Might be, if I had to rank them, this is probably number 4.
Okay.
And I think because the first one was so like, wow, what is this? The last issue blew my socks off. This one was very good, but this one, and a lot of comics have this when they have long story arcs. There's usually what I call the setting the table. There's a setting the table issue, where it's like, there's not really anything hugely stand out that happens. It's mostly just like, this is where these people are, this is where these people are, this is where these people are, so then when we jump into the next issue, we can get going. Felt a little bit like, and again, not bad. I really dug this issue. But it did feel like we were checking in with all 4 storylines, and it was more about like, well, this is where these people are right now, and this is what they're saying they're going to do next. This is where they are, this is what they're going to do next, kind of a thing. This felt a little less exploratory, outside of the finale, when the Phalanx enter the picture.
I do feel like there was some exploring, though. We learned about Apocalypse.
This is true. That's very true.
Which makes you immediately question, after what you saw last issue, is X100 Life 9?
Yes.
Because this is something you and I were talking about, and we talked about last week on the show. They give you the graph breakdown of all of Moira's lives, and Life 9 never ended.
Yeah.
But yet, she's begun Life 10.
And is Life 9 where she's the wife of Apocalypse?
Yeah.
So
I know.
that might be their child.
So
That might not be straight up Apocalypse.
I don't know. But, I mean, if anyone was going to live 100 more years, it's Apocalypse.
It's Apocalypse, yeah.
You know, he's been around for a while. Oh, I actually really love this scene,
I did too. I thought that was great.
With Scott and Eric and Xavier setting up Orchid and Mother Mold and how it has to be stopped. And this is the Scott I'm here for. This is the Scott I'm here for right here.
I agree. I love
Him at first being like, can it be done? Or, you know, and then they're like, listen to me, Scott. They have to be stopped. And then remember, this is a frontal assault of an orbital station tens of millions of miles away, built by a secret organization whose sole purpose is the extinction of mutants. Can such a thing even be done? Does it need doing? Yes. Then it will be done. I'm like,
yep.
Yeah.
That hard leader.
That's that, like, Scott we've been getting the last 10 years that I'm so glad he's making sure is a part of this series, where it's like...
Yeah, and I understand, like, when this whole thing started, I remember a lot of people kind of going like, well, wait a minute, what set this up, and this, that, and the other. And I love that Hickman kind of just threw you into the deep end.
Yeah.
And that so much of this book has been kind of discovering things as it goes along. And again, it's what I was talking about with my favorite X-Men stories. This is a big what if.
Okay.
Especially with Moira. What if somebody had lived 10 lives?
Yeah.
And what if Magneto and Xavier both admitted they were wrong? And that's kind of what came up in this issue. Both of them admitting that they're wrong.
Yeah.
And what happens
And
next.
what I also like is through that conversation and what happened with Moira in the last issue, it's kind of setting up that every X-Men story you've ever read was their failures.
Yes. Which is fascinating.
And this is supposed to be the timeline where everything's different. Which kind of sets this apart from the rest of the Marvel Universe, and I'm so okay with that.
So yeah, that's what we're talking about. It's like, again, outside of like 2 panels and a little bit with the Fantastic Four in issue 1, the Marvel Universe like is non-existent in this, and I'm okay with it. With my X-Men, I'm kind of okay with them dealing with their own shit.
Yeah.
And the Magnetos and the governments of the world and all this other stuff. I love these ideas, these characters of the Sinister Children, like the mutants who are like molds of other mutants.
Yep.
I love all that. The Chimera kids. I love that. And then the reveal of Apocalypse is so good. Ugh, it's all so good.
So much good stuff. I love the reveal of Apocalypse. But then, like I said, though, it immediately puts everything into question for me.
Yes.
Is this year 10? Or life 10? Or is it life 9? And we know if Hickman didn't tell us what life 6 was, that's important.
Oh, yeah. Oh, 100%.
By not telling us what life 6 was and keeping it off the graph, it's extremely important.
It's amazingly important, and also the fact, too, that what I love about this is, like, it's sort of bringing up Age of Apocalypse earlier, is that they love going, on Kenny X-Force they did it, they love going back to the Age of Apocalypse world. Hickman basically just created 10 worlds, that anytime a new X-Men writer in the future wants to be like, let's go to Moira World 5.
Yeah.
They could just have the X-Men like pop in, some Wolverine pops the closet and they're like, what the hell? And the last page reveals like, oh my god, it's Lady Apocalypse Moira.
Langley says, just curious how this all eventually ties into the Marvel Universe as a whole. I don't care.
Well, I don't know if it will.
I don't want it
to. That's sort of the thing about the X-Men that's always interesting. So again, like my favorite runs, like I said, new X-Men, there's this whole mutant genocide. Magneto almost destroys the entire world by changing the poles and all this other stuff. And there's neither hide nor hair of Captain America or Spider-Man or any of that stuff. The X-Men kind of always have been able to play in their own verse, which, as someone who's a creative and wants to maybe one day write the X-Men, what a relief.
Yeah.
That you can have this giant world-changing thing, and people aren't going to come in and be like, well, where's Blade?
Oh, by the way, who do you think this Krakoa is? He a...
Yes, so something about, they said this in the Crocera thing where it's like, this was someone else's body. I'm wondering whose mind it is.
Right.
Whose mind is it? And I'm wondering if it's going to end up being like an Xavier. Or Moira.
I don't know.
Because I'm like, whose mind? Because he says like, yeah, he's like talking about like this past body and this, that, and the other. So part of me is like...
Is that like a Nova Corps, like, symbol?
And he's obviously like Groot-like in the fact that he's a plant. But is that because he's a mutant?
They say it's Krakoa. They say it's Krakoa.
Yeah, there's a number of things. So that character fascinates me.
Right. And then we've got Zorn as well.
Which
and they call Zorn. So this isn't like a mutant creation.
No.
This is apparently Zorn.
As far as we know at the moment, this is all Zorn.
It says, like, this body once belonged to a mutant who could communicate with anything. I maintain that all he has, though he has long left this existence, we will find a way. So I'm like, well, who was that mutant?
So people are saying they're wondering if it's Krakoa using Cypher's body.
But because we do introduce Cypher as a person talking to Krakoa.
Yes.
So that kind of tracks.
It tracks.
That tracks. And it wasn't Cypher that we saw die in Powers of 10 #1, right?
No.
It was, who was it? It was a different mutant. There were 2 that died technically in that book. I do hope that this is the same Wolverine though, and just like
I just want it to be let it be
older.
super old Wolverine, please, by all means. I just want it to be. If there's one consistency I love in the X-Men books from the beginning to now, anytime there's a future world, it's Wolverine. I'm totally fine if this is just old Wolverine. Powers of X.
Man, I love so much about these books though. This to me, like, it's already becoming one of my favorite X-Men stories ever.
Oh, it's so good. Mostly because it's like I love leaving each of these X-Men books and kind of going like, oh God, I don't know, kind of a thing. But like in an interesting way, not in a frustrated way.
This whole setup for superior intelligence.
Yes.
And what makes something a superior intelligence, and then we jump ahead to X-1000, the X-Men Year 1000.
Oh, yeah.
You're like, what the fuck? Because the librarian itself, it sounds like from the way this is worded that they called Phalanx there.
It does.
And Phalanx asks, what do you seek? And it's Ascension.
And then we find out what that means
right.
in the classic Hickman.
And if any of you are wondering, I don't know if you know the character Warlock from New Mutants run. He was a member of the Phalanx.
He's great.
Dang, so much good shit. So much good shit. So then they break down for you the types of societies and at what level intelligence they are and what level of kind of like, yeah.
And also, we talked about it a little bit before the show, everything with Nimrod. I love.
Right, I love that this Nimrod is a little bit of a child.
Like, he's very petulant. He doesn't like being interrupted, but then we'll also kind of come in and be like, well, as we all know, kind of thing. Yeah, everything with Nimrod, I love. Yeah, I don't know. I'm really, really loving this run. Like, it's the book I'm most excited to read every week.
Every week.
And thank God, like we were saying this last night, thank God it's weekly, because I think if it was monthly, I would have stuck with it, but I could easily see people getting frustrated.
And here we go again. We see these issues are in red. What do you think that means?
Well, House of X2 was the Moira issue, so that might, to me...
Do you think these are going to be Moira issues?
It could mean Moira, or it could mean, like, really, like, world-changey, like, this is what this actually means, kind of a thing. Because if you remember, in Power of X1 is when Moira came up and was like, oh, I've always known you, Xavier, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, what? And then that's explained in Red House of X1. So I'm wondering if, like, House of X5, does something come up in Power of X4 that they're like, and now here we go.
Yeah. Well, we've only got about 9 minutes until Rat Queens tonight. So for all you comic book fans who are tuning in on YouTube or Twitch, head over to Rat Queens on our Twitch channel. It's live, and it is technically a comic book RPG, but these wonderful ladies have been tasked with making these characters their own and telling their own story within the world of Rat Queens. So you never know what you're going to get, and you're in for a lot of surprises. So you should definitely check it out.
Yeah, it's great. It's really, really good.
I do want to say, Cameron, thank you so much for coming by today and talking comic books with us.
Oh, God, anytime. Now I got to go read Gideon Falls? Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
The horror one?
Oh, dude. Yeah. Lemire?
Oh.
Killing it. He's killing it on that book. The amount of indie books that are coming out right now that I get so excited for every week. Like, if you just start going through my list of books, like Space Bandits, amazing. We talked about that last week. Sea of Stars, amazing.
How is because it's Donny Cates, I'm excited to read it. How is the Carnage stuff?
The first issue was good. All the side stuff, I don't give a shit about. All the tie-ins, I don't fucking care. Even though they've tasked some good writers on, but it's another one of those tie-in things. It's kind of like War of the Realms. I thought War of the Realms, the main story that Jason Aaron was telling, was great.
It was a mixed bag. It was a mixed bag.
Don't do all the tie-ins. Like, just let it be a single thing. Let it be a single thing.
Well, since we have a little bit more time, is there any stuff anything you're rereading, anything you're going back on and checking out?
There was recently. I mean, I go back and I read Junji Ito a lot because it's a lot of inspiration for as a GM trying to like build worlds with that constant like dread overhanging.
Right.
So I go back and read that a lot. Let's see. Sometimes when I just scroll through my list here, I'll see kind of like what I'm.
So I've been rereading. We're talking about him. I've been rereading Morrison's Batman from the beginning.
Oh wow.
So that's like the Man-Bat stuff at the start, and the bringing in of Damian and all this other stuff. Because I have the DC app, and that's been a lot of fun. That's been kind of fun, especially knowing where it's going to go and seeing where he's like, oh yeah, he set up some of this stuff really early, and I didn't catch it, But now in a reread, you go, oh. Here's that, here's this, here's that.
I go back and I read Hickman's Avengers run once a year almost, just for fun, because it's so much fun. And I know that I'm going to end up becoming like that with the XMen as well. Other books that I reread a lot, I did just start rereading Lazarus, because it's gotten so far along, and I forgot a lot of the beginning with Greg Rucka, and I liked it.
Lazarus is very good, but yeah, I got to do the same, because it's been a
minute since I read it all. God, there's always something. I keep a lot of books that I'm kind of like revisiting often.
I did pick up a bunch of, and I only just started, was Peter David Supergirl.
Never read it.
From the 90s, which Peter David, I think, is like, despite the fact that he is a old school writer who's been around for a long time, I feel like he never 100% has gotten his dues. Like, that guy nails it, like, time after time after time. And it's because they're not like the world-shattering stories. I feel like they get forgotten. But man, like his Young Justice, his Supergirl, Aquaman. His Aquaman run is my favorite run of Aquaman ever. Mm-hmm. But like the Hulk, like he basically the reason the Hulk is more than just the angry guy is all Peter David. Like he created the Mr. Fix-It character, the Smart Hulk, the Gray Hulk. That was all Peter David. But like anytime Peter David stuff is on sale on Comixology, pick it up right away. So Supergirl, and also, have you read any of these Marvel Epic collections?
No, I find if I have time to read books, I'm gonna read some like really inspiring indie book that I haven't picked up yet. You know what I mean? Like, I love keeping up with certain superhero stuff, but I feel like I've read a lot of what I think I'm gonna like. So I stick to like I recently just picked up Die 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 Volume 1 from Kirkman because I hadn't been reading it, and it's really fun. It's really fun.
I just started reading Birthright.
Oh yeah. Issue 1 of Birthright, I still to this day say might be one of the best issue 1s of all time.
I've been loving Birthright. I've been loving, let's see, what else did I recently snag? I finally have all of Seven to Eternity. So I'm going to be doing a big sit and read on that because it's Remender, and that's what I do with Remender. I'm just going to take a big old day, sit down, and do nothing else but read Seven to Eternity.
I think that book is the next Star Wars.
Really?
I'm so confident that Seven to Eternity, if it was put in the right people's hands, could be like the next new epic.
That's awesome.
You know, like it's that good, and the world building is so crazy and unlike anything you've seen. It's like Saga, but you know, whereas Saga's really at its heart just about family. Seven to Eternity has much bigger ideas.
Have you read
much grander thing?
Have you read Revival?
Oh yeah.
Oh, Tim Seeley's another man. Like Tim Seeley, admittedly, like I've met a couple times. Really nice dude too. That's always great. I love when like a really good writer's also like a sweet guy. Tim Seeley's a really good. Revival is so dope. And if you've not read Revival, I cannot recommend Revival enough. Especially if you like interesting small town horror-y kind of stuff. That one is so good.
Yeah. All right, everybody. So it's time for you to get hyped, get humped for Rat Queens. Thank you all so much for joining us today for Comics and Coffee. Don't go anywhere. If you're over on the YouTube or Facebook side, head to twitch.tv/hyperrpg to tune into Rat Queens. We beg you to do so. And if you are just watching us on Twitch, don't go anywhere. Stay right where you are. Enjoy some pumped up music and stick around. You got a really fun show coming up in just a little bit.
Keep reading comics, y'all.
Bye.